The day my own family sold the memories of my entire life, they smiled and told me they were just old things. They had no idea that every box they carried away held a piece of the woman I had become, or that one forgotten letter hidden behind a broken drawer would expose a secret my late husband had protected for years. They thought they were getting rid of my past. Instead, they handed me the very proof that would change all of our futures. If this story touches something in your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end. Please, like this video if you've ever treasured something others couldn't understand. Subscribe if stories about family resilience and second chances speak to you. And before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd truly love to know who's sharing this journey with me. Before everything was taken from me, my life was quiet, in a way I had learned to appreciate. My name is Evelyn Carter. I was 68 years old, then living in the same little house in Dayton, Ohio, where my husband Robert and I had raised our daughter Melissa. It was not a fancy house. The kitchen cabinets had been painted 3 times. The hallway floor creaked near the linen closet. The front porch leaned slightly to the left no matter how many times Robert had promised he would fix it next spring. But it was mine. More than that, it was ours. Every corner held a piece of my life. The rocking chair beside the living room window was where my mother used to sit when she visited from Kentucky, crocheting with her silver-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose. The old walnut writing desk near the wall had belonged to Robert's father. The china cabinet held plates we only used at Thanksgiving, even though half of them had tiny chips along the edges. On the mantel sat framed photographs of birthdays, Christmas mornings, school plays, Robert in his army uniform, Melissa with missing front teeth, and me with dark hair I could hardly recognize anymore. To anyone else, maybe it looked cluttered. To me, it looked like proof that I had lived. After Robert passed away, the house became quieter than I ever imagined a house could be. The kind of quiet that had weight. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the mail truck stop outside, the branches scrape against the bedroom window at night. Sometimes, out of habit, I still turned my head to tell Robert something funny I had seen on television, only to remember his recliner was empty. That was when the keepsakes became even more important. There was my father's pocket watch tucked inside a small velvet box. He had carried it through 30 years of work at the railroad yard. There was the blue quilt my mother had made by hand, every square stitched from old dresses and shirts from our family. There was a bundle of letters Robert had written to me when he was stationed overseas, tied with a faded yellow ribbon. There was a music box Melissa used to wind up when she was little, dancing in her socks across the living room carpet. None of those things were valuable in the way banks understand value, but they were priceless to me. Melissa did not see it that way. She had grown into the kind of woman who liked clean countertops, white furniture, glass tables, and houses that looked like nobody had ever cried in them. She lived 20 minutes away in a newer subdivision with her husband Greg and their daughter Harper. Their home had smart lights, a kitchen island bigger than my first apartment, and a front lawn treated by a company that came every other Thursday. Whenever Melissa visited, she looked around my house with a tight smile. "Mom," she would say, picking up a stack of old photo albums, "you really should start sorting through some of this." "I know where everything is," I always answered. "That's not the point." "Mom," she would say, picking up a stack of old photo albums, "you really should start sorting through some of this." "I know where everything is," I always answered. "That's not the point." "What is the point then?" She would sigh as if I were a stubborn child. "The point is, you're getting older. One day, someone else will have to deal with all this." All this. She said it like my memories were a mess waiting to burden her. Greg was worse, though he hid it behind jokes. He was a real estate agent, always polished, always wearing shirts too crisp for a family dinner. He had a way of looking at my things not as memories, but as square footage being wasted. "Evelyn," he said one Sunday afternoon, tapping the side of the old china cabinet, You know, some of this antique stuff might actually sell. People pay money for vintage now. I'm not interested in selling." He laughed lightly. "Not everything has to be sacred." Robert would have hated that sentence. But Robert was gone, and I had learned that widows often swallow words just to keep peace at the table. My granddaughter Harper was 18, then a senior in high school, always holding her phone like it was an extra bone in her hand. I loved that girl deeply. I remembered rocking her to sleep when Melissa went back to work. I remembered baking sugar cookies with her, letting her press too many sprinkles into the dough. But by that year, Harper had begun looking at me the way young people sometimes look at old people, as if we are already halfway invisible. One afternoon, she came over with Melissa and wandered into the living room. "Grandma," she said, wrinkling her nose, "why do you keep all this old stuff?" I smiled, though it hurt, because old stuff remembers things we forget. She looked at me blankly. "That's kind of depressing." Melissa gave a little laugh. "See, even Harper thinks it's too much." I wanted to tell them that one day, if they were lucky, they would also have drawers full of cards, shelves full of photographs, and objects that could bring a whole person back with one touch. Instead, I just folded my hands in my lap. There had been signs before the betrayal happened. Small signs. The kind you explain away because you love the people giving them. Melissa began visiting more often, but not with warmth. She opened closets. She checked storage bins in the basement. She asked where I kept important papers. She wanted to know if I still had Robert's military documents, our house deed insurance papers, bank statements. "I'm just trying to help you get organized," she said. "I've managed fine." "I know, Mom, but you shouldn't have to do everything alone." Those words might have comforted me if her voice had carried tenderness. But there was something practical in it, something planned. Greg started coming with her measuring spaces with his eyes. Once I caught him standing in Robert's old workshop, looking over the tools. "Just admiring," he said when he saw me. But he was not admiring. He was assessing. At night, I would sit in Robert's recliner with a cup of tea and feel uneasy without knowing why. I told myself I was being sensitive. Grief can make a person protective. Loneliness can make innocent comments sound cruel. I did not want to become one of those old women who suspected her family of bad intentions. So I kept trusting them. That was my mistake. One Friday, in early May, Melissa arrived with a casserole and a bright smile that looked rehearsed. "Mom, I have an idea," she said. I looked up from folding laundry. "What kind of idea?" "You remember Carol Whitman, your friend from church who moved near Lake Erie?" "Of course. She called me. She said she'd love to have you visit for the weekend. I think it would be good for you." I frowned. "Carol called you?" "She didn't want to bother you directly. She knows you've been tired. I'm not that tired." Melissa sat beside me and took my hand. "Mom, you need a break from this house. From all the memories. Just 2 nights. I'll drive you up there Friday and pick you up Sunday." I looked around the room. The quilt was folded over the sofa. Robert's photograph watched from the mantel. The house felt suddenly fragile, though nothing had moved. "I don't know," I said. "Please," Melissa whispered. "Let me do something nice for you." That was the part that got me. A daughter asking to do something nice for her mother. I wanted so badly to believe it. So I packed a small overnight bag. I watered my African violets. I locked the back door. Before leaving, I touched Robert's photograph and whispered, "I'll be back Sunday." Melissa heard me and smiled too quickly. On the drive north, she talked more than usual. About Harper's graduation. About Greg's business. About how expensive everything had become. Gas, groceries, insurance, property taxes. She spoke as though money were a storm gathering over all of us. At Carol's house, everything seemed normal. Carol welcomed me with open arms. We drank tea, talked about church friends, and watched old movies. Yet every few hours I felt a tug in my chest. Something was wrong. On Saturday afternoon, I called Melissa. She did not answer. I called again that evening. Still nothing. When she finally texted, all she wrote was, "Busy day, Mom. Enjoy your weekend. Love you." I stared at those words for a long time. Busy with what? By Sunday morning, I was ready to go home before breakfast. Carol noticed my restlessness and asked if I was feeling all right. "I just miss my house," I said. She patted my arm. "That house has been your anchor." "Yes," I whispered. "It has." I did not know then that while I was sitting at Carol's kitchen table, strangers had been walking through my living room. I did not know hands I had never touched were opening my boxes, lifting my mother's quilt, turning Robert's letters over like cheap postcards, asking how much for this, how much for that. I did not know my daughter had stood in my driveway and sold pieces of my life for cash. I only knew that when Melissa finally came to pick me up, she would not look me in the eye. And by the time we turned onto my street, my heart was already pounding. Because my front porch was crowded with empty folding tables, and my living room curtains were wide open. The first thing I noticed was the silence inside Melissa's car. My daughter had always been a talker when she was nervous. When she was a little girl, she could fill an entire room with words just to avoid telling me she had broken a lamp or failed a spelling test. Even as an adult, when something troubled her, she would chatter about weather, traffic, grocery prices, anything but the thing sitting between us. But that Sunday afternoon, she barely spoke. She kept both hands on the steering wheel, her wedding ring flashing whenever sunlight came through the windshield. Her mouth was pressed into a straight line. Every few minutes, she glanced at me, then back at the road. "Did Carol feed you all right?" she asked finally. "She did." "That's good." Another long silence. "She said you seemed anxious." I turned my face toward the window. "I wanted to come home." Melissa gave a small, strained laugh. "Mom, it was only 2 nights. I know how long it was." Her fingers tightened around the wheel. I watched the highway signs pass. The closer we got to Dayton, the heavier my chest became. I tried to pray quietly, but the words would not come together. They scattered in my mind like loose buttons spilled across a floor. When we finally turned into my neighborhood, everything looked normal at first. Children were riding bicycles near the corner. Mr. Phelps was watering his lawn in a straw hat. The maple trees along our street moved gently in the late spring breeze. Then I saw my driveway. 3 folding tables were stacked near the garage. A cardboard sign leaned against one of them, the words written in thick black marker, "Estate sale." For a moment, I could not understand what my eyes were seeing. Estate sale. Those words belonged to dead people, to empty houses, to families dividing up what remained after someone was gone. I was not dead. I was sitting right there in my daughter's passenger seat. "Melissa," I said slowly, "what is that?" She did not answer. "Melissa." She pulled into the driveway and shut off the engine. Her face had gone pale, but her voice came out rehearsed. "Mom, before you get upset, I need you to listen." My hand moved to the door handle. Before I get upset? It wasn't what it looks like. I opened the car door. My legs felt weak as I stepped out, but anger gave me enough strength to walk toward the porch. There were scuff marks on the steps. The front door was unlocked. The curtains, which I always kept half drawn, were wide open as if the house had been displayed for strangers. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Not like coffee, lemon, polish old wood and the lavender sachets I kept in the hallway closet. It smelled like cardboard dust and other people. The living room looked bigger than I had ever seen it, because half of it was gone. The rocking chair by the window was still there, but the blue quilt was missing from its back. The small side table where Robert kept his reading glasses was gone. The stack of photo albums had disappeared. The brass lamp my sister gave me for our 25th anniversary was gone. The shelf near the fireplace where I kept Robert's letters in their ribbon was empty. I stood in the center of the room and tried to breathe. "What did you do?" I whispered. Melissa came in behind me. "Mom, please don't make this dramatic." I turned around so fast she stepped back. Dramatic Greg appeared from the hallway holding a plastic storage bin. He wore jeans and one of his expensive golf shirts, looking more annoyed than ashamed. "Evelyn," he said, "we knew this would be emotional for you." "You knew." His expression tightened. "That's exactly why Melissa didn't want to tell you beforehand." My knees nearly gave out. "You planned this." Melissa folded her arms, but I saw her chin tremble. "We helped you. That's what we did. You sold my things while I was away. They were old, Mom. Old does not mean yours." Greg set the bin down with a thud. "Nobody said they were ours. But realistically, someone had to step in. That house was becoming unmanageable." "My house." He exhaled sharply. "Yes, your house. But your daughter is the one who will be responsible when you can't handle it anymore." I stared at him. "I can't handle my home." Melissa moved closer, softening her voice in that way people do when they want to make cruelty sound like concern. "Mom, you don't understand how much stress this has put on me. Every time I come here, I see piles and boxes and old furniture. One day, if something happens to you, I'll be the one left sorting through it. Then wait until something happens to me." Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What isn't fair is sending me away so you could invite strangers into my home." She looked away. That tiny movement told me everything. I walked past her toward the hallway. The family photographs that had lined the wall were gone. All except one, my wedding picture, tilted crookedly near the bathroom door, as if someone had considered taking it, then changed their mind. In the dining room, the china cabinet stood open. Several shelves were empty. My mother's teacups were gone. The silver serving tray Robert's aunt had given us was gone. The Thanksgiving plates were gone. I opened the cabinet doors one by one, hoping somehow my eyes were wrong. They were not. In the guest room, boxes had been dragged from the closet. My old church program's birthday cards and Christmas ornaments were scattered on the bed like trash left behind after the valuable things had been picked over. In the basement, Robert's tools were missing from the pegboard. His fishing tackle box was gone. The army trunk that had held his uniforms and documents was open and half empty. That was when I began to shake. Not cry. Shake. There is a kind of pain that is too deep for tears at first. It comes as coldness in the hands, as pressure behind the eyes, as a ringing sound in the ears. Melissa followed me down the basement steps. "Mom, some things are still here." I turned to her. "Where are Robert's letters?" She blinked. The letters tied with yellow ribbon. They were on the shelf by the fireplace. "I don't know. Maybe someone bought them with the box." "With the box? They were just papers." I gripped the stair railing. Those letters had carried me through Robert's deployment, through lonely winters, through the first year of motherhood when I thought I was failing at everything. He had written things in those letters he never said aloud when he came home. Soft things, silly things, promises, prayers, pieces of his heart. And my daughter had let a stranger carry them away. I pushed past her and climbed the stairs. Greg was in the kitchen now looking at his phone. "How much?" I asked. He looked up. "Excuse me, How much money did you make selling my life? Mom, Melissa said behind me. No, I want an answer. Greg slipped the phone into his pocket. We haven't finalized everything. Cash was taken from strangers in my driveway. Don't insult me. His jaw tightened. Around $8,000. The room blurred. $8,000. Melissa quickly said, It's going toward your future care, my future care. Yes, we thought it would be responsible to start a fund. Where is this fund? Neither of them answered. Melissa. I said, my voice low. Where is the money? She looked at Greg. That look was not quick enough to hide. Greg stepped forward. The money is secure. In my account, we're managing it. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You sold my belongings, kept the money, and called it care. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. But I knew my daughter. Those tears were not guilt. Not yet. They were frustration that I was not behaving the way she needed me to behave. You always do this, she said. You make me the villain. No, Melissa. Today, you did that yourself. Greg's face hardened. You should be grateful. A lot of people your age live in dangerous clutter because their families are too afraid to intervene. My father's watch was not clutter. He looked briefly confused. The velvet box in the top drawer of my bedroom dresser? I said. Where is it? Melissa's face changed. She knew. Where is my father's watch? Greg cleared his throat. That was one of the better pieces. I felt something inside me crack open. Better pieces, I repeated. It sold quickly, he said. Collectors like railroad items. I reached for the back of a kitchen chair to steady myself. My father had put that watch in my palm the week before he died. He had told me, Evie time takes everything except what love remembers. I had never let anyone touch it without sitting beside them. Even Robert had handled it like it was sacred. Now it was gone, sold quickly, by my own family. I looked at Melissa, then not at Greg, not at the empty cabinets, not at the boxes. At my daughter, the baby I had carried, the little girl I had taught to read, the woman who had called me crying after Harper was born because she was scared she would not be a good mother. How could you? I asked. For 1 second, something like shame crossed her face. Then Greg put his hand on her shoulder. And it disappeared. We made a practical decision, she said. I nodded slowly. That was the moment I understood something I had refused to see for years. Melissa did not come to my house to help me. Greg did not come to admire old furniture. They had both been walking through my memories with price tags in their minds. I left the kitchen without another word. I walked into the living room and sat in Robert's recliner because it was one of the few things they had not touched. Maybe it was too worn to sell. Maybe no one wanted the chair where my husband had spent his final months watching baseball and holding my hand. Melissa stood in the doorway. Mom, please say something. I looked at the empty shelf where Robert's letters had been. I want you both out of my house, Mom. Now! Greg scoffed. This is ridiculous. I did not raise my voice. Get out. Maybe it was the quietness that startled them. Maybe it was the fact that I was no longer begging for an explanation. Whatever it was, Melissa picked up her purse. Greg grabbed his car keys and muttered something under his breath. At the door, Melissa turned back. You'll understand someday. I looked at her with a pain so sharp it felt clean. No, I said. I think today I finally understand. The door closed behind them, and for the first time since Robert died, my house did not feel lonely. It felt violated. I sat there until the evening light faded across the floorboards. Then I stood and began moving from room to room, touching what remained. A chipped mug, a framed wedding photo, an old Bible, a broken walnut writing desk near the wall that Greg must have considered worthless because one leg was cracked and taped with black electrical tape. I ran my fingers over its scratched surface. Robert had kept that desk long after everyone told him to throw it away. He used to say, "Some things only look broken from the outside." I opened the top drawer. It stuck halfway, as it always had. I tugged gently. The drawer jerked forward, and something inside the desk made a soft wooden pop. A thin panel at the back shifted loose. I froze. Behind it, tucked into a narrow, hidden space, was an envelope yellowed with age. My name was written across the front in Robert's handwriting. Evelyn. My breath caught in my throat. For a long moment, I could not move. Then I reached inside with trembling fingers and pulled out the forgotten letter. I held that envelope as if it might disappear if I breathed too hard. The house around me was nearly dark. The only light came from the small lamp beside Robert's recliner, the one with the crooked shade he had always meant to replace. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street, its headlights sliding across the wall, briefly touching the empty shelves and the bare spots where framed photographs had hung that very morning. My name sat on the envelope in Robert's handwriting. Evelyn. Not Evie, the name he used when he was teasing me. Not Mrs. Carter, the name he wrote on birthday cards when he wanted to make me laugh. Just Evelyn. Careful. Serious. The way he had said my name when something mattered. I lowered myself into the chair beside the broken writing desk and placed the envelope on my lap. My hands were trembling so badly I had to press them against my knees. For a moment, I was not in my stripped-down living room anymore. I was back in the hospital room during Robert's final week, listening to machines breathe beside him. He had been thinner than I ever wanted to remember, but his eyes were still clear. He had held my hand and told me not to let loneliness make decisions for me. At the time, I thought he meant grief. Now I wondered if he had meant Melissa. The thought hurt so much, I pushed it away. "No," I whispered into the room. "Not our daughter." But the empty shelves answered for her. I did not open the envelope that night. I wanted to. I truly did. But some part of me knew that once I read whatever Robert had left inside, I would not be able to unknow it. The letter felt less like paper and more like a doorway. I was frightened of what stood on the other side. So I tucked it into the pocket of my cardigan and walked through the house again. This time, I made myself look carefully. In the hallway, pale rectangles marked the wallpaper where pictures had been removed. I remembered hanging those frames with Robert when Melissa was 12. She had complained that her school portrait looked awful, but Robert said, "One day, you'll be glad your mother saved every version of you." Every version of you. Now the wall was blank. In the dining room, the empty china cabinet stood with its glass doors open like a mouth that had been forced silent. I ran my fingers along the dusty shelf where my mother's teacups had rested. One had a tiny crack near the handle. Another had painted roses almost worn away from years of washing. Melissa had once begged to drink hot chocolate from those cups when she was 5. I could still hear her little voice. "Make it fancy, Mommy." I leaned against the cabinet and closed my eyes. How does a child who once believed chipped cups were treasure grow into a woman who sells them from her mother's driveway? Upstairs, my bedroom had been searched more thoroughly than I first realized. The dresser drawers were not closed all the way. My jewelry box sat open. They had left the costume beads and taken the few real pieces. My pearl earrings from Robert were gone. The little gold cross my grandmother had worn was gone, and the velvet box that held my father's watch was missing from the top drawer. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed a hand to my chest. My father had not been an easy man. He worked long hours and spoke in short sentences. Love for him usually came as repaired screen doors, full gas tanks, and envelopes with grocery money tucked inside. But the night before he died, he had called me to his bedside and placed that pocket watch in my palm.
"This kept me on time for work,"
He had said, his voice rough.
"Maybe it'll remind you that your time belongs to you."
I had not understood then why he said it with such force. Now, sitting in my half-ransacked bedroom, I understood perfectly. My time, my memories, my home, my life. They had treated all of it as if it were already theirs to divide. By midnight, I had gathered what remained into small piles. The old Bible went on the kitchen table. Robert's wedding ring, which I had kept in a small ceramic dish, was still safe in the drawer beside my bed. A few photo albums had been overlooked in the linen closet. My wedding photograph was still on the hallway wall, crooked but present. I carried these surviving pieces into the living room and placed them around me like witnesses. Then I called Melissa. She did not answer. I called again. This time Greg picked up. "Evelyn, it's late. I want a list." He sighed. "A list of what every person who bought something from my house, every item sold, every dollar taken. That's not realistic. It is realistic if you kept records. This was a family matter, not a business transaction. You made it a transaction when you put prices on my belongings." There was a pause. I heard Melissa say something in the background, her voice sharp and scared. Greg came back on the line. "You need to calm down." I almost smiled. Men like Greg always reached for that sentence when a woman became inconvenient. "I am calm," I said. "That is why you should be worried." Another silence. Then his voice lowered. "Careful, Evelyn. You don't want to turn your own daughter against you." I looked around my empty living room. "She already turned," I said. I hung up before he could answer. Sleep did not come. I sat in Robert's recliner until morning, the forgotten letter still in my cardigan pocket. Every time I touched it, I felt both comforted and afraid. I made coffee at 6, though I barely drank it. At 7:30, my doorbell rang. For one wild second, I thought it might be Melissa coming back to apologize. It was Mrs. Alvarez from across the street. She stood on my porch, holding a small cardboard box. Her silver hair was pulled into a bun, and her eyes were full of pity. "Evelyn," she said softly, "I didn't know." I opened the door wider. "Didn't know what?" "That you weren't aware of the sale." She looked past me into the house and swallowed. "Melissa told everyone you were downsizing. She said it was too painful for you to be here, so she was handling it." My fingers tightened around the doorframe. "She said that—" Mrs. Alvarez nodded. "A lot of people came. Some from the neighborhood, some from Facebook Marketplace, I think. Greg had signs out early Saturday morning." Facebook Marketplace. My family had not only sold my memories, they had advertised them. Mrs. Alvarez lifted the box. "I bought these because I thought maybe you had agreed, but when I saw your face yesterday, I knew something was wrong." Inside the box were 3 framed photographs. One of Robert holding Harper as a baby, one of Melissa at her high school graduation, one of me and Robert dancing at our 30th anniversary party. My throat closed. "I'm so sorry." Inside the box were 3 framed photographs. One of Robert holding Harper as a baby, one of Melissa at her high school graduation, one of me and Robert dancing at our 30th anniversary party. My throat closed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I can't imagine." I took the box with both hands. "Thank you." She glanced toward the driveway. There were others who might bring things back if they know. How many came? She hesitated. Please, at least 30 people, maybe more. I nodded, though I felt dizzy. After she left, I placed the returned photographs on the mantel. 3 small pieces of a life returned from the wreckage. Then my phone rang. Melissa. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, she said, breathless. What did you say to Greg last night? I asked for a list. You scared him. Good. That's not fair. I stared at Robert's photograph. Do you know what is not fair, Melissa? Mrs. Alvarez bringing back my family pictures because she had more conscience than my own daughter. I stared at Robert's photograph. Do you know what is not fair? Melissa, Mrs. Alvarez bringing back my family pictures because she had more conscience than my own daughter. She began to cry then, but the sound did not soften me the way it once would have. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she said. Then explain it. I can't. Because there is no explanation. No, because you'll judge me. I am your mother. I have spent my life trying to understand you. She was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, Greg says if you make this ugly, Harper will suffer. A chill moved through me. There it was. Not apology, not remorse. A warning wrapped in my granddaughter's name. I closed my eyes. For years, Melissa had brought me her problems like broken dishes and expected me to glue them back together. Money problems, marriage problems, motherhood problems. I had listened. I had helped. I had forgiven. I had mistaken being needed for being loved. But that morning with my home stripped bare and Robert's letter in my pocket, something inside me shifted. You tell Greg, I said slowly, that I want the list by tonight. Mom, and Melissa, what? If you ever use Harper as a shield again, you and I will have a different conversation than this one. Her breath caught. I hung up. For the first time in 2 days, I stood straight. Not because I was healed. I was far from healed. My father's watch was gone. Robert's letters were gone. My mother's quilt was gone. There were wounds in that house no apology could quickly mend. But I was no longer floating helplessly inside the pain. I had something now. A witness from the grave. A letter my husband had hidden where only I would find it. I walked back to the walnut writing desk and sat down. Morning light spilled across the envelope, turning its yellowed edges gold. My thumb traced Robert's handwriting one more time. Evelyn. The house was quiet. This time, the quiet did not frighten me. I slid my finger beneath the flap and opened the letter. The flap tore unevenly because my hands would not stop shaking. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the paper inside. It was folded twice the edges, softened with age, carrying the faint smell of cedar and old ink. Robert had always kept cedar blocks in the drawers because he hated mothballs. Even that small detail almost broke me. I unfolded the letter slowly. His handwriting filled the page, firm in some places, weaker in others. I knew immediately this had been written near the end. The letters leaned slightly, as if each word had cost him strength. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then either I did not find the courage to tell you everything while I was alive, or time took me before I could. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Robert had never been a man for dramatic words. He said what he meant, fixed what was broken, and believed love showed up more in action than speeches. Seeing my dearest Evelyn written so carefully felt like hearing his voice across a distance no living person could cross. I kept reading. There are things I protected you from because I thought I was protecting your heart. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe a husband should not choose which truths his wife is strong enough to carry. You are always stronger than I gave you credit for." A sob rose in my throat, but I forced myself to keep going. "I need you to listen to me now, Evie. Not with fear. With that steady mind I loved from the first day I met you. If Melissa ever makes you feel confused about your own judgment, stop and breathe. If Greg ever speaks for her too quickly, pay attention. If anyone tells you your memories are clutter, remember this: the person who wants you to let go of your past may also want you to loosen your grip on your rights." I read that sentence 3 times. Your rights. A cold understanding began to move through me. Robert had seen it, long before the estate sale, long before the empty shelves, long before I stood in my own living room, feeling like a stranger in a house I had scrubbed, painted, prayed in, and paid for. My husband had seen something in Greg that I had refused to name. I looked toward the front window where the afternoon light fell across the empty place where my mother's quilt used to be. A strange stillness entered me. Not peace, not yet, but focus. The letter continued. "I had concerns before I got sick. You remember the winter Melissa asked for help with the credit cards? You remember how I told you it was handled. It was not just credit cards. It was more, much more. I paid what I could because she was our daughter and because Harper was little. But Greg was involved, and he did not like owing me." My chest tightened. I remembered that winter. Melissa had been exhausted crying at our kitchen table, saying bills had gotten away from them. Robert had taken care of it privately. When I asked how much, he kissed my forehead and said enough to let them breathe. I had believed that was the whole story. Apparently, it was not. I went to Linda Marshall afterward. Not because I stopped loving our daughter, but because I love you too much to leave you unprotected. Linda helped me set up certain safeguards. I wanted to tell you, but then the diagnosis came, and every day became about doctor's medicine and trying to memorize your face. The paper blurred. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my cardigan. There is a safe deposit box at First Dayton Community Bank. Box 417. The key is taped beneath the bottom drawer of this desk. I put copies of everything there. The trust papers, the house protections records of the money given to Melissa and Greg, and a letter from me to Linda explaining my concerns. My breath caught. I almost dropped the page. The key. I bent down beside the desk, my knees protesting. The bottom drawer was stiff, swollen slightly from years of Ohio humidity. I pulled once, twice, then worked it loose with both hands. Inside were old receipts, a dried-up pen, and a small packet of furniture screws Robert had saved for no reason I could understand. I ran my fingers beneath the drawer. At first I felt only rough wood, then tape. My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it. I peeled the strip back carefully. A small brass key came loose and fell into my palm. For a moment, I just stared at it. A key no bigger than my thumb. Ordinary, quiet. But in that moment, it felt heavier than everything my family had carried out of my house. I returned to the chair and kept reading. Do not confront them with anger first. I know you, Evie. You will want to ask why. You will want to believe there is an explanation that makes it hurt less. There may not be. That line pierced me more sharply than I expected, because Robert was right. Even after all of it, the empty walls, the missing watch, the sold letters, the way Melissa had used Harper's name like a warning, I still wanted a reason that would let me keep loving my daughter the old way. I wanted to hear she had been desperate, confused, pressured, misled, anything but willing. But the letter did not let me hide. Go to the bank. Ask for Thomas Reed if he is still there. If not, ask for the branch manager and show them this letter and the key. Then call Linda Marshall before you sign anything. Promise anything or forgive anything. A laugh broke through my tears. Even dying Robert was giving instructions like he was showing me how to reset the breaker box. Before I folded the letter, I read the last part. And one more thing. Your keepsakes are not foolish. I know sometimes I teased you about saving every card and ribbon, but I understood. You were never collecting objects. You were keeping proof that love had passed through your hands. Anyone who makes you ashamed of that does not deserve control over it. I love you beyond this life, Robert. I sat there for a long time after finishing. The house remained silent, but it had changed again. Last night, that silence had felt violated. This morning, it had felt watchful. Now it felt as though Robert had stepped into the room and stood beside me. Not as a ghost, not as a fantasy, as preparation. He had prepared. While I was grieving his illness, while I was counting pills and warming soup and pretending not to cry in the shower, he had been using what little strength remained to protect me from a future I could not imagine. I pressed the letter to my chest and let myself cry then. Not the stunned, frozen pain from the day before. Real tears for Robert, for my father's watch, for my mother's quilt, for the letters that might never come back, for the daughter I had loved so fiercely that I had mistaken her selfishness for need. And perhaps most of all, I cried for the version of myself who had sat quietly while Greg made jokes about my home, who had smiled through Melissa's complaints, who had allowed them to speak about my life as if I had already left it. When the tears passed, I washed my face, changed into a navy dress Robert had always liked, and put the brass key into my purse. Then I called First Dayton Community Bank. A young woman answered. First Dayton Community Bank, this is Angela. How may I help you? My name is Evelyn Carter. I said, I need to access a safe deposit box. Do you have the box number? Yes. 417. One moment, please. Soft music played through the phone. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the empty space on the wall where the old calendar had been. Even that was gone. Who buys someone's used calendar? Or had Melissa simply thrown it away? Angela returned. Mrs. Carter, yes. For box 417, you'll need to come in with identification and the key. The account has special notes attached. Our branch manager will need to assist you. Special notes. My hand tightened around the phone. Is the manager Thomas Reed? I asked. There was a pause. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Reed is still with us. I closed my eyes. Another piece of Robert's letter was true. Can I come today? He has an opening at 2:30. I'll be there. After hanging up, I stood still for a moment. Then, almost without thinking, I went to the hallway mirror and looked at myself. I saw a tired woman with swollen eyes and gray hair pulled back too tightly. I saw age in my neck, grief in my mouth, shock still lingering in my face. But I also saw something I had not seen in a long time. Resolve. At 1:15, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My body stiffened. Through the curtain, I saw Melissa's SUV. She stepped out carrying a manila envelope and wearing the expression of someone coming to handle a problem. Not comfort a mother. Handle a problem. I slipped Robert's letter into my purse beside the key. Then I opened the door before she could knock. Melissa froze on the porch. Mom, she said we need to talk. I looked past her. Greg was in the passenger seat of the SUV watching. No, I said quietly. Not yet. Her eyebrows drew together. What does that mean? It means I have an appointment. Where I met her eyes. For the first time in years, I did not explain myself. I'll let you know when you need to know. She stared at me, startled by the stranger I had become in my own doorway. Then I closed the door, locked it, and picked up my purse. The forgotten letter had not given me all the answers, but it had given me the first step. And sometimes, the first step is the moment a woman stops asking permission to save herself. The drive to First Dayton Community Bank felt longer than any drive I had ever taken. I had made that trip hundreds of times over the years. Robert and I opened our first joint checking account there when Melissa was still in diapers. We deposited Christmas money there, cashed payroll checks there, argued gently in the parking lot about whether we could afford a new water heater there. It was not just a bank to me. It was one of those ordinary places that quietly witnesses a family's life. But that afternoon, every stoplight felt like a warning. I kept Robert's letter on the passenger seat tucked inside a folder with my driver's license, social security card, and the brass key. Every few minutes, I glanced at it as if it might speak again. At one red light, my phone rang. Melissa. I let it ring. A few seconds later, it rang again. Then came a text. Mom, please don't do anything rash. I stared at those words until the light changed. Rash. That was what my daughter called it when I finally protected myself. I placed the phone face down and kept driving. When I reached the bank, I sat in the parking lot for a full minute before getting out. My reflection in the rear-view mirror startled me. I looked older than I had that morning, but I also looked less frightened. Pain had drawn lines across my face, yes, but something else had settled there too. A decision. Inside the bank was cool and quiet. The same marble counter stood near the entrance, though the chairs had been replaced with modern gray ones. A young teller looked up and smiled. How can I help you today? My name is Evelyn Carter. I have an appointment with Mr. Thomas Reed. Her expression changed just slightly when she heard my name. Not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. One moment, Mrs. Carter. She picked up the phone, spoke softly, then nodded toward a hallway. Mr. Reed will see you now. Thomas Reed was older than I expected, though not old. Maybe late 50s. Tall, with silver at his temples and kind eyes behind rectangular glasses. When he stepped out of his office, he did not give me the polished smile of a banker trying to sell something. He looked at me as if he had been waiting for years. Mrs. Carter, he said gently. I gripped my purse strap. Mr. Reed. Yes, ma'am. He offered his hand. I knew your husband. My throat tightened. You did. He nodded. Not well as a friend, but well enough as a customer. Robert came in several times before he passed. He was very clear about what he wanted protected. Protected? That word again. He led me into his office and closed the door. The room was neat with framed certificates on the wall and a small photograph of two boys in baseball uniforms on his desk. He gestured to a chair. Would you like some water? No, thank you. I sat down, but my back stayed straight. I placed the folder on my lap and took out Robert's letter. He told me to come here, I said. Thomas took the letter carefully, as if he understood paper could be sacred. He read only the first page, then folded it again. I'm sorry for your loss, he said. He's been gone 3 years. I know, but grief changes shape. It doesn't disappear. Those words nearly undid me. Instead, I nodded. I have the key, I said. And your identification? I handed it over. He checked everything, then opened a file on his computer. His face grew more serious. Mrs. Carter, before we go to the vault, I need to explain something. Box 417 has access restrictions. Your husband arranged it so that only you and under very specific circumstances, Attorney Linda Marshall could access it. My daughter can't know. My son-in-law. His eyes lifted to mine. Absolutely not. Something in my chest loosened. Thomas continued. There is also a note in the file. If anyone attempted to access the box on your behalf, the bank was instructed to contact you directly and require in-person verification. I went still.
Attempted.
He hesitated.
Mr. Reed.
He folded his hands on the desk.
About 7 months after your husband passed, your daughter came in asking whether Robert had left any safe deposit boxes. She said she was helping manage your affairs.
The room seemed to tilt. What did you tell her? That we could not disclose account information without proper authorization? And Greg, he came with her. Of course he did. I stared at the edge of Thomas's desk, at the tiny scratches near the corner where a coffee mug had left a faint ring. Did they have anything? I asked.
Any paper saying they had authority? They brought a power of attorney form.
My mouth went dry. I never signed a power of attorney.
I know,
Thomas said quietly.
the document they brought was not accepted. There were irregularities. Irregularities. It was such a clean word for something filthy. Was my signature on it?
Thomas paused too long. My hands went cold.
Yes,
he said. But it did not match what we had on file. Your husband had also left written instructions warning us that no financial authority should be transferred without direct confirmation from you and Linda Marshall. For a moment, I could not speak. It was no longer only about keepsakes. It had never been only about keepsakes. The sale was not a sudden mistake born from stress. It was part of something wider, something that had started before I even knew to be afraid. My own daughter, I whispered. Thomas's expression softened, but he did not offer empty comfort. I appreciated that. At my age, you learn the difference between kindness and noise.
Would you like to proceed to the box?
He asked.
Yes.
He led me down a hallway to the vault area. Every step echoed. The walls were thick, the air colder, the lighting brighter. A bank employee verified my identification again. Then, Thomas used a master key, and I used the small brass key Robert had taped beneath the desk drawer. The metal box slid free with a heavy sound. Thomas carried it into a private viewing room and placed it on the table.
They'll be right outside, he said. Take all the time you need.
When the door closed, I sat alone with the box. For a strange second, I could not open it. I thought of Robert's hands putting these things inside. I pictured him walking into this bank thinner than he used to be, probably pretending he was stronger than he felt. Had he rested afterward in the car? Had he been frightened? Had he known he would not live long enough to explain? Finally, I lifted the lid. Inside were several large envelopes, each labeled in Robert's handwriting. House trust documents. Melissa and Greg financial records. Linda Marshall, contact immediately. Personal for Evelyn. I touched the last envelope first, but I did not open it. Not yet. I knew if I read another personal letter from Robert, I might lose the strength I needed for the practical papers. So I opened the trust documents. The words were legal and dense, but some phrases stood out clearly enough. Carter Family Residence Protection Trust. Primary beneficiary, Evelyn Carter. No sale transfer lien occupancy change or asset liquidation involving the residence or its contents may be authorized without direct written consent from Evelyn Carter and confirmation from Linda Marshall, Esquire. Its contents. I read the phrase again. The house had been protected, and so had the things inside it. Robert had not only protected the walls, he had protected the memories. My fingers trembled as I opened the second envelope. There were copies of checks, bank statements, handwritten notes, a signed repayment agreement with Melissa's name and Greg's name below it. The amount made me gasp. $46,000. Not credit card help, not a small loan. $46,000 paid over several months to cover debts, late mortgage payments, and something marked as business loss reimbursement. Business loss. Greg's business. Beneath those papers was a note from Robert. Evie, if you are reading this, know that I did not tell you because I hoped they would make it right. I did not want you to carry disappointment while I was sick, but I also did not want them to rewrite the story after I was gone. Rewrite the story. I thought of Melissa telling me they had created a fund for my future care. Greg saying they were managing the money. The way both of them stood in my kitchen as if they had done me a favor. They were already rewriting it. The next envelope held Linda Marshall's contact information, along with a sealed letter addressed to her. There was also a copy of the rejected power of attorney form. I forced myself to look. There it was. My name. My supposed signature. It looked similar at a glance, but wrong in the details. Too pointed. Too rushed. Whoever had copied it knew the shape of my name, but not the rhythm of my hand. A memory flashed through me. Melissa sitting at my kitchen table months earlier, asking me to sign a birthday card for Harper's graduation scrapbook. "Just write it nice, Mom," she had said. "I love your handwriting." Had she used that card to practice? The thought made me feel physically ill. I reached for the table and steadied myself. "No," I whispered. "Don't fall apart here." I gathered the papers, carefully returning each one to its envelope. Then I opened the final one. Personal for Evelyn. Inside was a smaller note, only a few lines. "Evie, if this box has become necessary, then I am sorry." I wanted to believe love would be enough to keep everyone honest. But love without boundaries becomes a door people walk through, carrying away pieces of you. Do not hate our daughter, but do not hand her the knife twice. Call Linda. I love you. R. I folded the note and pressed it against my heart. When I stepped out of the viewing room, Thomas was waiting. "Mrs. Carter." I held up the envelope marked Linda Marshall. "I need to make a phone call." He nodded and led me back to his office, where he closed the door and gave me privacy. Linda answered on the third ring. "Linda Marshall's office. This is Evelyn Carter," I said. "My husband Robert told me to call you." There was a silence on the line. Then a woman's voice, older and steady, said, "Evelyn." "I've been waiting for this call for 3 years. My knees weakened. I knew Robert was afraid you might need help someday. I need it now. Tell me what happened." I looked through the glass wall of Thomas's office at the bank lobby where ordinary people were cashing checks and making deposits, unaware that my whole life had just shifted beneath my feet. "My family sold my keepsakes," I said, "and I think that was only the beginning." Linda's voice sharpened. "Do not speak to them alone again. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Bring me every document from that box." I closed my eyes. For the first time since I had come home to those empty folding tables, I did not feel alone. "I will," I said. And as I hung up the phone, I saw Melissa's SUV pull into the bank parking lot. Greg was driving. For 1 second, I truly thought my heart had stopped. Through the glass wall of Thomas Reed's office, I watched Greg step out of the SUV first. He adjusted his shirt, smoothed his hair, and looked toward the bank entrance with the confidence of a man who believed every room would eventually bend to him. Melissa got out slowly behind him. She looked smaller than she had the day before. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest, and her face was pale. She said something to Greg, but he waved her words away before she finished. Even from inside the bank, I could recognize that gesture. I had seen it at Thanksgiving dinners, school events, birthday parties, Greg dismissing Melissa without ever appearing rude enough for anyone to call it what it was. "Control." Thomas returned to the office just as I stepped back from the glass. "Mrs. Carter." "They're here," I said. His expression changed. "Your daughter and son-in-law." "Yes. Would you like to remain in my office?" Before I could answer, Greg entered the bank lobby with Melissa close behind him. His eyes swept across the room and landed on me almost immediately. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw surprise cross his face. Not guilt, not shame,
Surprise. He had not expected me to be standing inside the bank manager's office with papers in my hand. He began walking toward us. Thomas moved to the doorway before Greg could enter. "Mr. Wheeler," he said evenly, "this is a private office." Greg smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Thomas, we just need to speak with Evelyn. You may wait in the lobby. This is a family matter." Thomas did not move. "Mrs. Carter is here on bank business." Greg's gaze slid past him to me. "Evelyn, this is getting out of hand." I looked at Melissa. She would not meet my eyes. "Did you follow me?" I asked. Greg gave a short laugh. "Don't be dramatic." Melissa was worried. "Melissa has my phone number. She tried calling, and I chose not to answer." That landed. I saw it in Melissa's face. All her life, when she called, I answered. If she needed money, help, babysitting, sympathy, a casserole, an excuse, I answered. Ignoring her call had shaken her more than I expected. Greg stepped closer, lowering his voice as if Thomas were the intruder. "Evelyn, you don't understand what you're doing. You're involving outsiders in something that should stay within the family." I held the folder tighter. Outsiders did not sell my father's watch. His jaw tightened. Outsiders did not forge my signature. The words changed the air. Melissa's head snapped up. Greg's face did not move for a second, and that stillness told me more than any confession could have. Thomas glanced toward me. "Mrs. Carter, would you like me to call security?" Greg's smile returned thinner now. "Security? Really? For a son-in-law trying to speak to his mother-in-law? You are not speaking to me," I said. "You are trying to corner me." Melissa whispered, "Mom, please." That one word almost reached the softest part of me. Almost. I looked at her and saw both women at once. The child who used to climb into my lap after nightmares, and the adult who had stood in my house, calling my memories old things. My heart did not know what to do with the contradiction. "Melissa," I said quietly, "did you know about the power of attorney?" Her lips parted. Greg turned sharply toward her. "Don't answer that." And there it was. "Not what power of attorney? Not Evelyn? What are you talking about? Don't answer that." Thomas's posture stiffened. Melissa stared at the floor. I felt grief rise up inside me, but this time it did not knock me down. It straightened me. "You did know," I said. "No," she whispered. "I mean, I didn't understand all of it." Greg grabbed her elbow. "We're leaving." She pulled back from him. "Not much, but enough." "I didn't think they would accept it," she said. My voice nearly failed. "So that makes it better." Her eyes filled with tears. "Mom, we were desperate." "For what?" Greg cut in. "This is exactly why we didn't tell you. You twist everything into betrayal." I turned to him. "Then untwist it." He blinked. "Explain it," I said. "Explain why my signature was on a legal document I never signed. Explain why you tried to access Robert's safe deposit box 7 months after he died. Explain why you sold my personal belongings while I was out of town. Explain why the money is not in my account." People in the lobby had begun to look over. Greg noticed. Men like him always noticed witnesses. His voice dropped. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "You're finally being seen." Melissa covered her mouth. Thomas stepped slightly between us. "Mr. Wheeler, I'm going to ask you to leave." Greg's eyes hardened. For the first time, the polished real estate smile vanished completely. "You people have no idea what you're interfering with," Thomas answered calmly. "On the contrary, the bank has documented every relevant attempt at unauthorized access." Greg went still again. Documented. That word struck him like a slap. I watched the calculation move behind his eyes. He had come to frighten me.
Maybe to convince me I was confused, maybe to get me away from the bank before I learned too much. But he had walked into a room where Robert's precautions, Thomas's records, and Linda Marshall's name had already changed the balance of power. "Mom," Melissa said, her voice breaking. "Can we please just talk outside?" I thought of Robert's note. Do not speak to them alone again. "No," I said. She flinched. "I will speak with you when my attorney is present." "Your attorney?" Greg scoffed. "You're seriously going to hire a lawyer against your own daughter?" I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Robert already did." For the first time since I had known him, Greg had no answer. His face lost color. Melissa stared at me as if I had spoken from a place she could not reach. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means your father saw more than I did." That sentence broke something in her. Tears spilled over at once, not the frustrated tears from the kitchen, not the defensive tears from the phone call. These were different, smaller, terrified. Greg saw them too, and his expression twisted. "Melissa," he snapped. "Car. Now." She did not move. He leaned close to her. "Now." Thomas opened the office door wider. "Mr. Wheeler, leave the premises." Greg looked at each of us, Thomas, Melissa, me, then laughed once under his breath. "Fine," he said. "Let lawyers sort it out. But don't come crying when this destroys the family." He walked out, first shoulders, stiff phone already in his hand. Melissa stayed. For 10 seconds, she stood in the doorway like a woman trapped between two fires. Then she looked at me. "Mom," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I wanted those words." Lord help me, I had wanted them since I saw the estate sale sign in my driveway. But apology offered while a person is still hiding truth is not repentance. It is panic. "What are you sorry for?" I asked. She opened her mouth. No words came. That was my answer. I nodded once. "Go home, Melissa." Her face crumpled. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "You can start by telling the truth." She looked toward the parking lot where Greg waited in the SUV, then back at me. "I can't," she whispered. Then she left. I watched her walk out of the bank, every step heavy, every step still taking her away from honesty. When the doors closed behind her, my knees weakened. Thomas quickly pulled the chair closer. "Sit down, Mrs. Carter." I sat. For a moment, all the strength I had shown drained out of me. My hands shook again. My breath came shallow. Thomas offered water this time, and I accepted. "I'm sorry you had to face that here," he said. "I think I needed to." He nodded slowly. Sometimes people reveal more when they realize the room is no longer under their control. I almost laughed at that, though my eyes were wet. Linda called back before I left the bank. I told her what had happened, every word I could remember. Her response was immediate. "Bring the documents to my office. Today." Today, Evelyn attempted misuse of a power of attorney, unauthorized sale of protected personal property, and possible financial exploitation are not small matters. We need to move before Greg decides to cover tracks. The phrase made my stomach tighten. Cover tracks. Of course. Greg was a real estate agent. He knew paperwork. He knew transactions. He knew how to make things look clean after they had been dirty. "I'll come now," I said. Thomas made copies of the bank records he was legally able to provide at that stage and placed them in a sealed envelope. He also wrote down a summary of the prior attempted access, including dates. When he handed everything to me,
His voice softened. Your husband cared very much about your security. I held the envelope against my chest. He always fixed things quietly, I said. Thomas smiled sadly. This may have been one of his finest repairs. Outside the parking lot was empty. Greg and Melissa were gone. The afternoon sun was bright enough to make me squint, and for a moment I simply stood beside my car, breathing. The world looked ordinary. People drove past. A woman pushed a stroller along the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, someone was mowing grass. How strange, I thought, that a life can change completely while the rest of the world keeps its regular appointments. I placed the folders carefully on the passenger seat. Robert's letter lay on top. Before starting the car, I touched his handwriting. You were right, I whispered, but I wish you hadn't had to be. Then I drove to Linda Marshall's office. Her building sat downtown in a brick road near the courthouse. I had only met her twice before, both times years ago, when Robert insisted we update our wills. Back then, I had thought legal papers were cold things necessary, but distant. Now they felt like a shield. Linda was waiting at the reception desk when I arrived. She was in her early 70s, with short white hair, sharp blue eyes, and the kind of presence that made a room straighten itself. She took both my hands. Evelyn, she said, Robert told me that if this day came, I was to remind you of one thing. My throat tightened. What? You are not helpless. I closed my eyes. No, I thought, not anymore. Linda led me into her conference room, spread the documents across the table, and began reading. As she moved from page to page, her expression grew harder. By the time she reached the estate sale details, the rejected power of attorney, and Robert's financial records, she removed her glasses and looked at me. Evelyn, she said your keepsakes were not just sentimental items. Under the trust language, many of them were protected personal property. If Melissa and Greg sold them without your consent, they may be legally responsible for recovering them or paying their appraised value. I thought of the quilt, the letters, the watch. Can we get them back? We can try. And if we can't, her eyes softened. Then we make sure they understand that memories are not worthless just because they underestimated the woman who owned them. For the first time in days, I felt something warmer than anger. I felt Robert beside me again. Linda picked up her pen. Now, she said, tell me every item you remember. So I began. My father's watch, my mother's quilt, Robert's letters, the teacups, the photographs, the tools, the military trunk. One memory at a time, I named what had been taken. And with every name, I felt myself becoming less empty. Because they had sold my keepsakes. But they had not erased my memory, and now, finally, someone was writing it all down. Linda Marshall did not waste words. That was one of the first things I remembered about her. Years earlier, when Robert and I sat across from her to update our wills, she had explained everything with a clean, steady precision that made even frightening subjects feel manageable. She did not decorate the truth. She placed it on the table and expected grown people to look at it. That afternoon, I was grateful for that. She spread the documents from the safe deposit box across the conference table, arranging them into neat piles. Trust papers on the left. Bank records in the center. Copies of checks and repayment agreements on the right. The rejected power of attorney form sat by itself near her legal pad, as if even the paper needed to be isolated. I sat across from her with my purse in my lap, Robert's letter tucked inside like a pulse. Linda adjusted her glasses and looked at me. Evelyn, I need you to understand something before we go further. I nodded. What happened at your house was not simply insensitive. My throat tightened. It may have been unlawful.
Hearing it said aloud changed something. Until then, part of me was still standing in my empty living room, hearing Melissa say they were just old things. Some tired, wounded part of me still wondered if maybe I was overreacting because grief had made me too attached. Because I was old. Because the world had moved on and I had not. Linda's words cut through that fog, not simply insensitive, unlawful. She tapped the trust document. Robert was very specific. Your residence and protected personal property could not be sold, transferred, removed, or liquidated without your direct written consent and legal confirmation. These protections were not decorative. They matter. I swallowed. Even things like quilts and letters, especially if they were identified as protected personal property or part of the household contents covered under the trust language. But how do we prove what was sold? We start with memory, then photographs, insurance records, family videos, witnesses, online listings, payment trails. Her eyes sharpened. And we make them produce whatever records they have. I thought of Greg standing in my kitchen saying the money was secure. I thought of Melissa glancing toward him before answering as though every truth had to pass through him first. I don't know if they kept records. Linda leaned back. Greg Wheeler is a real estate agent. Men like that rarely move money without leaving a trail. They simply assume no one will know where to look. There was something in her voice that made me study her. You don't like him, I said. I met him once. When? About 6 months before Robert died. That surprised me. Robert never told me. No, Linda said softly. He asked me not to unless it became necessary. My hands tightened around the strap of my purse. What happened? Linda took a breath, then opened one of the folders. Greg came with Melissa to my office. They said they were helping your husband get documents in order because he was ill. My mouth went dry. Robert wasn't with them. No. And that was the first problem. Greg asked several questions about your home, your accounts, whether Melissa would inherit, whether a power of attorney could be prepared in advance, whether adult children could make household decisions if a surviving parent became confused. A chill moved slowly down my spine. Confused, I whispered. Yes. Robert knew I called him immediately afterward. He was quiet for a long time. Then he came in alone the next week. I looked down at the table. I could see Robert so clearly. Tired, sick, proud. Walking into Linda's office alone because he did not want me frightened. Still trying to handle the storm before it reached me. He should have told me, I said, but there was no anger in it, only sorrow. Yes, Linda said, he should have, but he loved you, and dying people sometimes make imperfect choices for loving reasons. That sentence settled heavily in the room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Linda slid a paper toward me. This is the repayment agreement Robert had Melissa and Greg sign. I stared at the signatures. Melissa Carter Wheeler, Gregory Paul Wheeler. Beneath them was the amount $46,000. I never knew it was that much, I said. Robert structured it as a formal loan because Greg insisted it was temporary. According to Robert's notes, Greg said he had a delayed commission payment and a business investment that would turn around quickly. I laughed once bitterly. Greg always had something that was about to turn around. Linda gave me a look that told me she had heard that sentence many times from many women. Did they ever pay anything back? I asked. 3 payments, then nothing. And Robert didn't pursue it. No. He told me he didn't want to add pressure while Harper was young. But he kept records. Of course he did. My Robert who saved every receipt for home repairs in shoeboxes labeled by year.
My Robert, who believed written proof was not distrust, but memory with structure. Linda opened another folder. Now about the estate sale. You said Greg mentioned around $8,000. Yes. Do you believe that was accurate? I don't know. We will find out. But I suspect not. Why? She turned her laptop toward me. Because while you were driving here, my assistant did a preliminary search using Greg's phone number and public marketplace listings. On the screen were photos. My dining room, my china cabinet, my mother's quilt folded over a table in the driveway, Robert's tools arranged in rows, my father's velvet watchbox. The breath left my body. I leaned closer, unable to stop myself. The listing title read, Vintage Railroad Pocket Watch, Estate Find. Price, $2,800. I covered my mouth. Linda's voice softened. Is that your father's watch? I nodded, but no sound came out. The photograph showed the watch open, resting on a dark cloth. The gold case caught the light. The tiny scratch near the hinge was visible. I knew that scratch. My father had made it one winter morning when he slipped on icy steps going to work. That's it, I whispered. Linda clicked another image. The listing says sold. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I was 8 years old again, watching my father pull that watch from his vest pocket before leaving for the railroad yard. I remembered the metallic click when he closed it. The smell of tobacco and cold air on his coat. The way he ruffled my hair and said, "Don't let the day outrun you, Evie." Something inside me folded in on itself. Linda gave me time. Then she said, Evelyn, I'm going to ask something difficult. Do you want to continue? I opened my eyes. Yes. She nodded once. The next listing showed my mother's quilt. Handmade vintage quilt blue patchwork, good condition. Price $450. Good condition. As if my mother's hands, her dresses, her long nights sitting by lamplight, stitching squares from worn cotton could be summarized that way. The listing was marked sold too. Another image showed Robert's letters bundled in a small wooden box with a collection of miscellaneous wartime paper ephemera. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my fingertips hurt. Ephemera, I said. Linda's face hardened. People use cold words when they don't want to feel what they are touching. The letters had sold for $75. $75 for years of longing marriage duty, tenderness, fear, and love. I thought I would break then, but I did not. Instead, an anger, unlike anything I had ever felt, rose through me. It was not wild. It did not make me want to scream. It became sharp, quiet, almost clean. How much did the listings total, I asked. Linda looked at me carefully. The ones we found so far. A little over $23,000. $23,000. Greg had told me around $8,000. Not only had they sold my life, they had lied about the price. Linda turned the laptop back. There may be more. Some items may have been sold in person, some through antique dealers, some through private buyers. Where did the money go? That is what we need to determine. I thought of Melissa saying it was for my future care. Greg saying they were managing it. Then I remembered something from the car ride to Carol's house. Melissa talking too much. Gas, groceries, insurance, property taxes, Greg's business. How expensive everything had become. Linda, I said slowly. Greg mentioned a condo in Florida once. Her eyes narrowed. When? A month ago. At Sunday dinner. He said real estate was cheaper in certain parts if you got in early. Melissa told him to stop talking about it. Linda wrote that down. Interesting. Why? Because large deposits connected to property transactions are traceable. I sat back, suddenly exhausted. The conference room felt too bright, too clean, too normal for what was being uncovered. On the table lay the proof that my family had not acted in a single moment of poor judgment. They had planned, advertised, listed, sold, collected, hidden, and maybe worst of all, Melissa had let Greg lead while pretending she had no choice. Linda pushed a yellow legal pad toward me, saying, "I want you to start a list. Every item you remember, even if it seems small. Do not decide what matters. Let me decide what can be used legally. You just remember." So I remembered. My father's watch, my mother's quilt, Robert's letters, the pearl earrings, the gold cross, the teacups, the silver tray, the brass lamp, Robert's fishing tackle, the army trunk, the Thanksgiving plates, the music box Melissa used to dance to when she was little. When I said that last one, my voice cracked. Linda paused her pen. "Take your time." I looked down at my hands. That music box was hers, I said. I kept it because she loved it. Linda's face softened. "They sold that too, I don't know yet. But I already knew. People who could sell love letters could sell a music box." By the time we finished the first list, the sun had shifted across the conference table. Linda made copies, placed documents in folders, and handed me a card with her direct number. "I'm sending a formal preservation letter to Melissa and Greg today," she said. "They are not to delete listings, destroy records, move funds, or contact buyers without legal notice," and handed me a card with her direct number. "I'm sending a formal preservation letter to Melissa and Greg today," she said. "They are not to delete listings, destroy records, move funds, or contact buyers without legal notice. What if they ignore it? Then they will make my job easier." For the first time that day, I almost smiled. Linda stood and walked me to the door. "Evelyn, tonight, do not let them pull you into an argument. They will likely call. Greg may threaten. Melissa may cry. Say one sentence only." "What sentence?" "All communication goes through my attorney." I repeated it quietly. "All communication goes through my attorney." It felt strange in my mouth. Strong, but strange. On the drive home, my phone buzzed 6 times. Melissa. Greg. Melissa again. Then a text from Harper. "Grandma. What is going on? Mom is crying, and Dad is furious. That one hurt." I pulled into my driveway and sat there staring at my house. The house they had emptied, the house Robert had protected, the house that still stood waiting for me. I typed back slowly. "I love you, Harper. This is between adults right now. I will talk to you when I can." Then I turned off the phone. Inside, the rooms were still bare, but they no longer looked like defeat. They looked like evidence. I placed Linda's folders on the kitchen table beside Robert's letter. Then I noticed something lying near the baseboard under the china cabinet, half hidden by dust. A tiny brass winding key. I bent down and picked it up. The key to Melissa's childhood music box. The box itself was gone, but the key remained. I closed my fist around it and felt tears rise again. Not because it was valuable, because it was proof that even when people carry away what they do not understand, they often leave behind the one small thing that can start the music again. That night, my phone did not stop buzzing. I had placed it face down on the kitchen table beside Linda's folder, Robert's letter, and the tiny brass winding key from Melissa's old music box. Every time the screen lit up, it cast a pale flash across those papers like lightning inside the room. Melissa called first, then Greg, then Melissa again, then a text from Greg. "You are making a terrible mistake." I did not answer. Another text came. "You have no idea how badly this can hurt Melissa." I stared at that one for a long time. Not once did he say, "I am sorry." Not once did he ask what I had lost. He only warned me about the consequences of noticing. I picked up the phone, typed Linda's sentence and sent it to both of them. All communication goes through my attorney. Then I turned the phone off. The silence that followed felt almost violent. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by evidence of betrayal and made myself eat a bowl of soup because Robert always said a person should never make hard decisions on an empty stomach. It tasted like nothing. Still, I ate every spoonful. Afterward, I walked room to room again, this time with a notebook Linda had given me. I wrote down what was missing from each space. Living room, blue quilt. Robert's letters, brass lamp, photo albums, side table. Dining room teacups, silver tray, Thanksgiving plates. Bedroom father's watch, pearl earrings, grandmother's cross. Basement tools, fishing tackle, army trunk contents. With each item I wrote another memory rose. I did not push them away. Linda had told me not to decide what mattered, so I wrote everything. Even the small things, especially the small things. Near midnight, I heard a car door outside. I froze. The porch light was on. Through the front window, I saw Melissa standing at the bottom of my steps, arms wrapped around herself. Greg was not with her. For a moment, I did not move. The mother in me wanted to open the door before she knocked. The wounded woman in me wanted to leave her standing there until morning. Between those two selves stood Robert's letter, Linda's warning, and the memory of my daughter looking at me in the bank, unable to answer when I asked what she was sorry for. She knocked softly. "Mom." Her voice came through the door, thin and trembling. I walked to the entryway but did not open it. "Melissa, this is not a good time. Please." "Just 5 minutes. All communication goes through my attorney. I know what you said." Her breath shook. "But I'm your daughter." I closed my eyes. There it was, the oldest key she knew how to use. I opened the door only as far as the chain lock allowed. Melissa stood under the porch light with swollen eyes and no coat, though the night air was cool. She looked younger than 44 in that moment. She looked like the girl who used to come home from school with a scraped knee and expect me to fix the whole world with a Band-Aid. But behind her at the curb, I saw no car. "How did you get here?" I asked. I walked from the corner. Greg dropped me off. Of course, close enough to control. Far enough to pretend she came alone. "What do you want?" She looked through the narrow opening at my face. "I want you to stop this before it ruins everything." I almost laughed, but the sound would have been too bitter. "Everything was ruined when you sold my belongings." "What do you want?" She looked through the narrow opening at my face. "I want you to stop this before it ruins everything." I almost laughed, but the sound would have been too bitter. "Everything was ruined when you sold my belongings. We didn't think." "No," I said. "You did think. That is the problem." She flinched. "Mom, Greg said the trust papers don't mean what you think they mean. Greg is not my lawyer. He said Linda is exaggerating to scare us. Then he should be very comfortable speaking with her." Melissa looked away. For the first time, I noticed something I had missed before. She was not only upset, she was afraid. Not of me, of him. The realization did not excuse her. But it complicated my anger, and I hated that. Simple anger is easier to carry than complicated love. "Melissa," I said quietly. "Where's the money?" She swallowed. "I don't have it." "Where is it? I can't talk about that." "You mean Greg told you not to?" Her eyes filled again. "You don't understand what things have been like." "Then help me understand." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I waited. The porch light hummed above us. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice. Finally, she whispered, "He said we needed a fresh start." "With my father's watch?" Her face crumpled.
I didn't know he listed that one for so much. That sentence struck me like a hand across the face. Not I didn't know he sold it. She knew it was sold. She just had not known the price. I stepped back from the door. Mom, please. Did you touch Robert's letters? Her lips trembled. Answer me. She nodded once. My hand tightened on the doorframe. Did you read them? No, I swear. I just put them in the wooden box. Greg said old military letters sell to collectors. They were love letters. I know that now. You knew that then. She began crying harder. I couldn't stop it. You helped. He said if we didn't get the money, we'd lose the condo deposit. There it was, the Florida condo. The word hung between us, small and ugly. I leaned closer to the gap in the door. So, you sold my memories to buy yourself a new life? No, it wasn't like that. What was it like? She covered her face. I thought we would replace some things later, she sobbed. I thought you wouldn't notice everything right away. I thought if we told you it was for your care, you would calm down, and then maybe we could fix it before. Before what? She looked at me then, and the truth nearly came out. I saw it rise in her eyes. Then her phone rang. She looked down. Greg, her whole body changed, shoulders stiff, tears swallowed, fear back in place. Don't answer, I said. I have to. No, you don't. She stared at the phone as if it were a leash. Then she rejected the call. For one brief second, pride and grief collided inside me. The phone rang again immediately. This time, she panicked. I have to go. Melissa. She was already stepping backward. Mom, please don't tell Linda about the condo yet. Why? Because Greg will... She stopped herself. Greg will what? Her eyes darted toward the street. Nothing. No. Say it. She shook her head. I can't. I looked at my daughter, standing on my porch, shaking under the weight of choices she had made and choices she was still afraid to unmake. And I understood Robert's line more clearly than ever. Forgive her if she repents, but protect yourself if she repeats it. Melissa was not repenting yet. She was only frightened of being exposed. I love you, I said. Her face broke. But I will not protect your lie. She pressed her hand to her mouth and turned away. I watched her walk down the steps. At the corner, Greg's SUV headlights flashed on. She climbed in, and the vehicle pulled away too quickly. I closed the door and slid the chain free with trembling fingers. For a moment, I leaned my forehead against the wood. Then I turned my phone back on and called Linda's direct number, even though it was late. She answered after 2 rings. Evelyn, they came tonight. Melissa admitted the money was for a condo deposit. Linda was silent for a beat. Did she say where Florida? Greg mentioned it weeks ago. Did she threaten you? No. But she asked me not to tell you. Linda exhaled softly. That tells me enough. I looked toward the kitchen table where the brass winding key waited beside Robert's letter. There's more, I said. I think Greg is controlling her. But Linda, she still helped him. Both things can be true, Linda said. Those words stayed with me. Both things can be true. My daughter could be afraid, and my daughter could be responsible. Greg could be manipulative, and Melissa could still have chosen betrayal. The next morning, Linda filed emergency notices to preserve records. By noon, Greg had received the formal letter. By 2, Melissa had called me 17 times. I answered none of them. At 4:30, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Harper. She stood on my porch with red eyes holding a plastic bag. Grandma?
She said I found something in Dad's trunk. Inside the bag was the wooden box that had held Robert's letters. Empty, except for one folded envelope stuck under the lining. My name was not on it. Melissa's was, and the handwriting was Robert's. For a long moment, neither Harper nor I moved. She stood on my porch, holding that plastic bag as if it contained something dangerous. Her cheeks were flushed from crying, and her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, the way she wore it when she was little and running barefoot through my backyard in July. "Grandma," she whispered. I didn't know what else to do. I opened the door wider. "Come in, sweetheart." She stepped inside slowly, looking around the empty living room, as if she were seeing the damage for the first time. Her eyes moved from the bare mantel to the empty shelf, then to the pale rectangles on the wall where pictures had been. "Oh my God," she said. I did not correct her. Sometimes shock needs the only words it can find. Harper placed the plastic bag on the kitchen table. Inside was the wooden box that had once held Robert's letters. It was scratched along one side, and the brass clasp was bent. I had bought that box at a craft fair in Columbus when Robert was still overseas. Every time one of his letters arrived, I tucked it inside as carefully as if it were a living thing. Now it was empty, except for the envelope wedged beneath the torn lining. Harper watched me pull it free. "Dad had it in his trunk under a blanket," she said. "I was looking for my graduation decorations. Mom told me not to go in there, but I did anyway." I turned the envelope over. Melissa's name was written across the front in Robert's hand. My daughter's name, not mine. The room seemed to narrow. Harper wiped her face with her sleeve. "Is that Grandpa's handwriting?" "Yes." "Why would Dad have it?" That question had too many answers, and none of them were gentle enough for an 18-year-old girl standing in the middle of a family collapse. I don't know yet. That question had too many answers, and none of them were gentle enough for an 18-year-old girl standing in the middle of a family collapse. I don't know yet. "Grandma," her voice cracked. "Mom told me you were confused. She said you got upset because they cleaned out some clutter. Dad said you were trying to punish them because you're lonely." The words landed hard, but not surprisingly. There it was again. Rewrite the story. I reached across the table and took Harper's hand. "I am lonely sometimes, but I am not confused." She looked around the room. "I can see that now." That broke my heart more than if she had argued with me. I carried the envelope into the living room and sat in Robert's recliner. Harper sat across from me on the edge of the couch, her knees pressed together, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked. "No," I said. "If you brought this here, you deserve to know why it matters." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 2 sheets of paper. The first was dated 8 months before Robert died. "Dear Melissa, if you are reading this, then I either lost the chance to say it face to face, or you refused to hear me when I tried." I stopped breathing for a second. Harper leaned forward. "What does it say?" I lifted a hand gently. "Let me read first." Robert's words continued. "You are my daughter, and nothing will ever change the fact that I love you. But love is not blindness. Your mother may forgive faster than I do, because her heart always runs toward people who are hurting. I have loved that about her, but I have also feared it. I could hear him. Not just the words, the pause between them, the seriousness in his voice when he sat at our kitchen table late at night, bills spread before him rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You and Greg came to me asking for help, and I gave it because Harper needed stability and because I believed you when you said it was temporary. $46,000 is not a small mistake. It is not a rough patch. It is a truth you need to face." Harper gasped softly. I looked up. 46,000? She whispered. I nodded. Her eyes filled again. They told me Grandpa helped with a car payment. I closed my eyes briefly. A car payment. Another softened lie. I kept reading. I do not regret helping my family. I regret that you allowed Greg to speak to me as if my help were an obligation instead of a sacrifice. I regret that you looked away when he did it. I regret that you let your mother believe everything was fine because it was easier than admitting you were drowning. My throat tightened because that was Melissa. Not cruel in the obvious way Greg was. Not sharp, not loud, not openly dismissive at first. Her weakness had always been avoidance. If the truth looked painful, she covered it. If someone she loved behaved badly, she explained it. If a lie kept the room peaceful, she let it stand. And sometimes a person who keeps peace with lies becomes more dangerous than the person telling them. Robert had seen that too. The letter went on. I am setting protections in place for your mother, not to punish you, to protect her from pressure, guilt, and decisions made in panic. If you ever find yourself tempted to take from her, speak for her, or decide what she doesn't need anymore, stop. Ask yourself whether you are acting like a daughter or like someone waiting to inherit. I pressed the page to my lap. That sentence was too much. Someone waiting to inherit. I remembered Melissa standing in my hallway a few months after Robert died, looking at the family photographs and saying, "Someday this will all have to be sorted." I remembered the way Greg had asked casual questions about home value repairs, taxes, insurance. I had thought they were being practical. Robert had known they were circling. Harper's voice trembled. Did Grandpa think Mom would steal from you? I looked at the girl I had loved since the moment she was born. I think your grandfather was afraid your mother would let fear make her do something wrong. Harper looked down. And Dad? I did not answer right away. Finally, I said, your grandfather did not trust him. She nodded as though she already knew, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. I read the final paragraph. Melissa, if this letter ever reaches you, then I am asking you for the last time, do not make your mother pay for your silence. Do not let Greg turn your fear into her loss. If you have already done something you are ashamed of, tell the truth before the truth has to drag you into the light. I love you. I have always loved you, but I will not leave your mother defenseless. Dad. The room was completely still. Harper was crying silently now. I folded the letter with care, though my hands had gone numb. The second sheet was not a letter. It was a copy of another document handwritten in Robert's familiar block letters. A record of payments, dates, amounts, check numbers, notes, mortgage arrears, credit card consolidation, business debt, emergency transfer, total $46,000. At the bottom, Robert had written one sentence. Forgive her if she repents, but protect yourself if she repeats it. I had seen that line once already in his letter to me, but seeing it attached to Melissa's debt made it land differently. Robert had not written it in suspicion. He had written it from heartbreak. He had already forgiven once, and he had prepared for repetition. Harper wiped her cheeks. Grandma, I need to tell you something. I looked up. What is it? She twisted her fingers together. Mom and Dad have been fighting about money for months. I heard them talking about Florida. Dad said if they could just get the deposit together, everything would change. Mom said, not from her. And Dad said, she swallowed. Dad said, she won't even know what half that junk is worth.
A cold wave moved through me. Harper's face crumpled. I didn't know he meant your things. I swear I didn't. I believe you.
He said you were sitting on money. That old people do that. They keep valuable stuff and complain about fixed income.
I closed my eyes. There was the ugliness underneath it all. Not misunderstanding. Entitlement. Greg had not seen my keepsakes as clutter. He had seen them as hidden cash. And your mother? I asked quietly. What did she say? Harper looked away. Sweetheart, she said, only the things she won't miss every day. The words entered me slowly. Only the things she won't miss every day. As if love only counts if it is used daily. As if a watch in a drawer cannot hold a father. As if letters in a box cannot hold a marriage. As if a quilt folded over a chair cannot hold a mother's hands. I stood because sitting suddenly felt impossible. Harper rushed to her feet. Grandma, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it. No, I said, though my voice shook. You should have. Truth hurts, but lies rot everything from the inside. She cried harder then, and I pulled her into my arms. For all her phone habits and careless teenage comments, she was still young enough to be horrified by adult betrayal. She had not yet learned how people justify cruelty in practical language. She had not yet learned how families can smile while crossing lines they should have guarded with their lives. I thought your stuff was just old, she whispered against my shoulder. I'm sorry I said that before. I held her tighter. You didn't understand. I want to understand now. That sentence opened a small window inside the grief. After she calmed, I showed her the tiny brass winding key I had found. This belonged to your mother's music box, I said. She used to dance to it when she was little. Harper took it carefully. What song did it play, Edelweiss? She smiled sadly. I don't know that one. I'll hum it for you sometime. She looked down at the key. Do you think they sold the box? Yes. Can we find it? We can try. For the first time she said, we. Not you, not they. We. Later that evening, I called Linda and told her about Robert's letter to Melissa. She asked me to photograph every page and bring the original to her office in the morning. This changes the emotional picture, Linda said, and it may help establish prior knowledge. Meaning Melissa knew Robert had warned her, yes. Or that Greg knew there were protections and reasons to hide what they were doing. I looked at Harper, who was sitting at my kitchen table, writing down everything she remembered hearing about Florida money and the sale. She wants to help, I said. Then let her write what she knows while it is fresh, but protect her from being used as a messenger. I promised I would. After I hung up, Harper looked at me. Is Mom going to get in trouble? I sat beside her. I don't know. Do you want her to? That question had no simple answer. I thought of Melissa as a baby asleep on my chest. Melissa as a teenager slamming doors. Melissa as a young mother crying from exhaustion. Melissa on my porch, terrified and still hiding. I want her to tell the truth, I said. Trouble is what happens when people refuse. Harper nodded slowly. Then she reached across the table and placed the brass winding key in my palm. Well, find the music box, she said. I closed my fingers around it. Maybe we would. Maybe we would not. But something had already been found that mattered more. The truth was beginning to move through the family. And once truth starts moving, even locked doors begin to shake. The next morning, Harper came with me to Linda Marshall's office. She had barely slept. I could see it in the shadows beneath her eyes, and the way she kept checking her phone, then turning it face down as if it had burned her. Melissa had called her too. Greg had texted.
Neither message had been opened while she sat at my kitchen table. "I don't want to lie for them," Harper said as we parked downtown. "But I don't want to destroy my mom either." I turned off the engine and looked at her. "Truth does not destroy people, sweetheart. It reveals what already needs to be repaired." She nodded, but she was 18. At 18, truth still feels like a weapon when adults have spent years using secrets as shelter. Linda received Robert's letter to Melissa with the seriousness of a woman accepting evidence and grief at the same time. She read every line twice. Harper sat beside me with her hands folded in her lap, looking painfully young in that office full of law books and framed certificates. When Linda finished, she removed her glasses. "Harper," she said gently, "I'm going to ask you some questions. You are not in trouble. You are not responsible for what adults chose. But what you heard may matter." Harper nodded. Linda asked about the Florida condo, about Greg's trunk, about arguments, about the estate sale signs, about whether Harper had seen any money buyer names receipts or online messages. At first, Harper answered in fragments. Then slowly the memories began arranging themselves. She remembered Greg printing labels at the kitchen counter. She remembered Melissa saying, "Not the letters," and Greg replying, "Paper collectors pay for authenticity." She remembered a man coming by the house the evening before the sale to look at the railroad watch. She remembered Greg telling someone over the phone, "The old lady doesn't need it anymore." At that, I had to close my eyes. The old lady. Not mother-in-law, not Evelyn, not even she. The old lady. Linda's pen paused for half a second, then continued. "Do you know the name of the man who bought the watch?" Linda asked. Harper frowned. "I don't, but Dad said he owned an antique place near Cincinnati, something with heritage in the name." Linda circled that. "Good," she said. "That helps." By noon, Linda's assistant had printed every archived online listing they could find before Greg deleted them. There were more than we had seen the day before. So many more. My grandmother's gold cross had been listed as small vintage religious pendant. Robert's Army medals, which I had not even realized were missing, had been grouped with military memorabilia lot. The music box had sold in a bundle with assorted decorative items. My daughter's childhood music box. Assorted decorative items. But at least now we had a clue. The buyer's profile showed a woman named Sandra Klein in Springfield, Ohio. "Some buyers may not know these items were sold improperly," Linda said. "We'll start respectfully. Many people return things once they understand. And if they won't," I asked, "then we proceed differently." She said it calmly enough that I believed her. Over the next 2 days, my life became a strange kind of investigation. Linda sent letters. Thomas provided bank documentation. Harper searched screenshots and old marketplace notifications from her father's shared family tablet, which he had forgotten still synced messages to the cloud. Mrs. Alvarez spoke with neighbors and quietly explained that I had not approved the sale. And then things began coming back. Not all at once. Not the most important pieces first. Small things. Mrs. Phelps returned my brass lamp wrapped in a towel. She cried on my porch and said she had bought it for her guest room, never imagining I had been deceived. A retired teacher from 2 streets over brought back 3 photo albums. She had paid $10 for all of them because she said, "I couldn't stand the thought of family pictures being thrown away." A young couple returned Robert's fishing tackle box. The husband looked embarrassed and said, "My grandpa fished too. This didn't feel right after we heard." Each return reopened the wound, but it also stitched something tiny back together. I placed every recovered item on the dining room table. The brass lamp, the photo albums, the tackle box, 2 teacups, a stack of church programs, 1 Thanksgiving plate, a framed picture of Melissa at age 7 holding a missing toothed smile. That photo hurt more than most. I kept wondering how much of my daughter was still in there somewhere under Greg's voice, under fear, under debt, under the terrible convenience of letting someone else decide wrong things for her. On the third day, Linda called. We found the quilt. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. Where? An antique shop outside Springfield. The owner bought it from Greg directly according to his receipt. Can I get it back? The owner was disturbed when he heard the circumstances. He's willing to return it for what he paid. How much? $450. I looked at the empty rocking chair by the window. My mother's hands had stitched that quilt from dresses worn to church aprons worn while making biscuit scraps of my childhood curtains. It had covered me when I had measles. It had covered Melissa when she slept over as a child. It had covered Robert's knees during his last winter. $450 sounded both insulting and enormous. I'll pay it, I said. No, Linda replied. We'll document the cost. You may pay it temporarily, but Melissa and Greg will be responsible for reimbursement if recovery terms proceed as expected. Still, I drove there myself. Harper came with me. The antique shop smelled of polished wood dust and old paper. It was the kind of place I used to enjoy before all this, before every vintage shelf began to look like someone else's sorrow for sale. The owner, Mr. Boyd, met us near the counter. He was a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a beard gone mostly gray. Mrs. Carter, he said, I am very sorry. I never would have bought it if I'd known. I believed him. He brought the quilt from the back room folded carefully in acid-free tissue. When he opened it across the counter, my knees nearly gave way. There it was. Blue squares, faded cotton, my mother's uneven stitching, a small patch from my father's old work shirt near the corner. I touched it with 2 fingers, and suddenly I was no longer 68. I was 9, lying on my mother's lap during a thunderstorm while she told me not to fear noise from heaven. Harper began crying beside me. I didn't know, she whispered. Grandma, I didn't know it was like that. I placed my hand over hers on the quilt. That is why stories matter, I said. Without the story, people see fabric. With the story, they see love. I didn't know, she whispered. Grandma, I didn't know it was like that. I placed my hand over hers on the quilt. That is why stories matter, I said. Without the story, people see fabric. With the story, they see love. Mr. Boyd cleared his throat and looked away, pretending to inspect a shelf until we composed ourselves. He refused to take the full amount from me. Give me $1, he said. I protested, but he shook his head. I've bought and sold antiques for 30 years. There's business, and then there's decency. So I gave him $1. He wrote a receipt anyway at Linda's request, marking the original transaction and the return. As we left, Harper carried the quilt like a newborn. That evening, we placed it over the rocking chair by the window. For the first time since the sale, the living room looked less violated. Not restored, but less empty. The next recovery was harder. Robert's letters had been sold to a paper collector in Indiana. Linda located him through the online transaction records. His name was Mr. Alan Mercer, and he answered her first message politely but firmly. He had purchased the letters legally, he said. He specialized in wartime correspondence. He had already separated them for cataloging, when Linda told me I had to grip the phone with both hands. Separated them? Yes, she said gently. But he has not resold them. Will he return them? He wants proof they belong to you. I have proof. We'll send it. For 3 days I waited. Those 3 days were worse than I expected. I could live without the brass lamp. I could live without the silver tray. But Robert's letters were the voice of our younger love. I knew he had written me other letters, one hidden in the desk,
one in the safe deposit box. But those wartime letters were different. They belonged to the years when we were still becoming who we would be. On the fourth day, a package arrived. No note, just the wooden box repaired as best as possible, and inside it, every letter tied again with the faded yellow ribbon. I sat on the floor and wept so hard Harper had to hold me. Later, I found a short email forwarded from Linda. Mrs. Carter, I apologize. I collect history, not heartbreak. Please accept their return. For a while, I believed perhaps most of the story could be repaired piece by piece. Then Linda called about my father's watch. Her voice was different, careful. I found the buyer, she said. The antique dealer. Yes. He sold it 2 days later to a private collector. My heart sank. Who? He has not disclosed the name yet. We may need formal legal action. I looked toward the mantel where my father's photograph had finally been returned. Is it gone? No, Linda said. It exists. That means it can still be found. But something in me knew the watch would not come back easily. That night, Melissa came to the house again. This time, Harper was there. Melissa stood in the doorway and saw the quilt on the rocking chair, the letters on the mantel, the photo albums stacked on the table. Her face changed with every recovered item. Then she saw the letter Robert had written to her lying beside Linda's folder. She stopped breathing. Where did you get that? She whispered. Harper stood. I found it in Dad's trunk. Melissa looked at her daughter, then at me. For the first time, there was no defense ready on her tongue, only fear. And maybe, finally, shame. Melissa stood just inside my doorway, staring at her father's letter, as if it had risen from the dead to accuse her. Harper did not move from beside the table. I could feel the tension between mother and daughter stretch across the room, thin and sharp. Outside, evening light pressed against the windows, soft and golden, making the recovered quilt on the rocking chair look almost holy. Melissa's eyes went from the letter to Harper. You went through your father's trunk. Harper's chin trembled, but she did not look away. I was looking for my graduation decorations. You had no right. The words came out too fast, too harsh, and I saw Harper flinch. Something in me snapped into place. Careful, Melissa, I said. My daughter turned toward me. Mom, she took something private. No, I said. She brought back something hidden. Melissa's mouth opened, then closed. The difference between those two things filled the whole room. She stepped closer to the table, eyes fixed on the envelope. Did you read it? Yes. Her face lost color. Harper's voice was small, but steady. I heard enough. Melissa pressed a hand against her stomach. Oh, God. For a moment, I thought she might sit down. Instead, she reached toward the letter. I placed my hand over it. No. Her eyes widened. It has my name on it, and it is now evidence. That word changed her expression. Evidence, she repeated. Yes. Against me, I looked at my daughter for a long moment. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say, of course not, baby, never against you. I wanted to be the mother who protected her from every consequence and wrapped this whole ugly truth in a blanket until it stopped shaking. But that mother had helped create the woman standing before me. It depends on what you do next, I said. Melissa's eyes filled. Harper whispered, Mom, just tell the truth. Melissa turned on her. You don't understand. No, Harper said, voice rising. I didn't understand before. I thought Grandma was being dramatic because that's what you and Dad said, but I saw the house. I saw the listings. I saw Grandpa's letter. Melissa looked as if her daughter had slapped her.
You're taking her side. Harper began crying, but her voice stayed firm. There shouldn't be sides when something wrong happened. The words landed hard. Melissa sank into the nearest chair. For the first time since the sale, she looked completely exhausted. Not polished, not defensive, not repeating Greg's phrases. Just tired in a way I recognized because I had carried that same kind of tiredness for years after Robert's diagnosis. I sat across from her. Where is Greg? In the car. Of course he was. Does he know you came in? She nodded. Did he tell you what to say? Her silence answered. Harper wiped her face. Mom! Melissa looked at her daughter, and something in her expression finally cracked. He said if I admitted anything, we could lose everything, she whispered. What everything, I asked? The deposit, the condo, his license maybe, the house if lawsuits start? He said Linda would destroy us. Linda did not sell my belongings. Melissa's shoulders folded inward. I know. Do you? She covered her face. I don't know what I know anymore. That sentence hurt because I believed it. Greg had spent years teaching her to doubt her own discomfort. I had watched him do it in small ways, though I had not called it control then. If Melissa objected, he explained. If she worried, he corrected. If she cried, he made her feel foolish. Over time, a person can become a stranger to her own conscience. But again, both things could be true. She had been manipulated, and she had betrayed me. I opened Robert's letter and slid it toward her. Read it. She stared at the page as if afraid it might burn her fingers. Mom, read what your father wrote. Her hands shook as she picked it up. The room went quiet except for the soft tick of the kitchen clock. Harper stood near the counter, arms wrapped around herself. I watched Melissa's eyes move line by line across Robert's handwriting. At first, her face was blank. Then, her mouth trembled. Then she stopped reading at the line. Do not make your mother pay for your silence. A sound came out of her that I had not heard since she was a child. A broken little gasp. She pressed the letter to her chest and bent forward, crying so hard her whole body shook. Harper started toward her, then stopped unsure. I did not move. Not because I felt nothing, because I felt too much. I had spent my entire motherhood rushing toward Melissa's tears. If she cried, I softened. If she panicked, I fixed. If she said she needed me, I opened every door. This time, I let her cry. When she finally lifted her head, her mascara had streaked down her cheeks. She looked at me with a rawness I had not seen before. Dad knew, she whispered. Yes, he knew I was weak. No, I said. He knew you were in danger of choosing weakness over truth. That made her cry again, but quieter. I didn't want to sell the letter, she said. But you did. Greg said, paper collectors do not give me Greg's voice, I said. Give me yours. She froze. Harper looked at me, then at her mother. Melissa swallowed hard. My voice, she said slowly, as if the phrase were unfamiliar. Yes. She looked down at the letter. My voice said it was wrong. The room changed. It was not enough. But it was the first honest sentence she had spoken. What else did your voice say? I asked. She wiped her cheeks. It said you would notice the watch. It said you would notice the quilt. It said I should call you before the sale started. But you didn't. No. Why? She closed her eyes. Because if I called you, you would say no. I let that sit between us. No excuses could survive beside that sentence. Harper whispered, Mom.
Melissa looked at her. I'm sorry. I lied to you too. Harper nodded, crying silently. I leaned back in my chair. Where is the money? Melissa stared at the table. Part of it went to the condo deposit. Part went to Greg's business account. Some cash is still in the safe at home.
How much cash?
About $6,000 sitting in a safe, while I paid $1 to reclaim my mother's quilt from a decent stranger. My hands curled in my lap. Did you know Greg tried to use a power of attorney with my signature? She looked at me horrified in a way that seemed real. I knew he had a form. He said it was just in case. I didn't know he took it to the bank.
Did you sign my name? No.
Her voice strengthened.
No, Mom. I swear to God I didn't.
Do you know who did? She looked toward the front window. At the car outside. The answer settled over us. Harper whispered, Dad. Melissa began to cry again, but this time there was fear in it. He said it didn't matter, because banks never check closely if it's family. I told him that was crazy. He said I was naive. Linda's warning echoed in my mind. Do not speak to them alone. I stood up. We are calling Linda. Melissa grabbed my hand. Please don't do it while Greg is outside. Why? He'll know I told you. Good. No, Mom. Her grip tightened. You don't understand. He's been deleting things. He told me if I turned on him, he'd say the whole sale was my idea. He said everyone would believe him because I handled the messages from my account. That was when the true shape of Greg's plan appeared. He had not only used Melissa, he had positioned her to take the fall. Harper stepped back, as if the floor had shifted. Mom, why didn't you tell someone? Melissa looked at her daughter with shame so complete it was hard to witness. Because I kept thinking I could fix it before anyone knew how bad it was. I picked up my phone and called Linda. This time, I put it on speaker. Linda answered calmly, but when Melissa began talking, that calm sharpened into action. She asked precise questions: dates, accounts, listings, passwords, buyer communications, the condo company name, Greg's business bank, the location of the cash. Melissa answered through tears. Outside, Greg honked the horn once. Melissa flinched. Linda heard it. Is Greg outside? She asked. Yes, I said. Do not let him in. Melissa, are you willing to come to my office tomorrow morning and provide a written statement? Melissa looked at me, then at Harper. Then she whispered, Yes. Greg honked again, longer this time. Harper moved to the window. He's getting out. I looked at Melissa. For years I had seen her step back whenever Greg entered a room. This time I watched something different happen. She stood, not strongly. Happen. She stood, not strongly, not confidently, but she stood. Mom, she said, lock the door. I did. Greg's footsteps crossed the porch. He knocked once hard. Melissa, he called. We're leaving. No one answered. He knocked again. I know you're in there. Not confidently, but she stood. Mom, she said, lock the door. I did. Greg's footsteps crossed the porch. He knocked once hard. Melissa, he called. We're leaving. No one answered. He knocked again. I know you're in there. Harper moved closer to me. Melissa's face was white, but she did not sit down. Through the locked door, Greg's voice lowered. Open the door before this gets worse. Linda spoke through the phone, clear and sharp. Evelyn, call the police if he refuses to leave. Greg must have heard her. The porch went silent. Then he laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think a lawyer scares me? I looked at Melissa. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were open now. No, I said loudly enough for him to hear. But the truth should. For the first time, Greg had nothing clever to say. A minute later, his footsteps retreated. His SUV door slammed. The engine roared. Then he was gone.
Inside my house, the 3 generations of women he had tried to divide stood together in the quiet, broken, afraid, but no longer silent. The next morning, Melissa arrived at Linda Marshall's office without Greg. I knew that mattered because Harper had spent the night at my house curled under my mother's quilt on the couch, and Melissa had texted her only once before dawn. "I'm going to tell the truth." Harper showed me the message with shaking hands. "Do you believe her?" she asked. I looked at the words for a long time. "I believe she wants to," I said. "We'll see if she does." That was the hardest part of betrayal. After someone lies to you, even hope has to be examined before you trust it. Linda's conference room felt different that morning. The blinds were open, and sunlight lay in bright strips across the table. There were folders stacked in front of each chair, a recorder in the center, and a yellow legal pad waiting beside Linda's pen. Melissa came in wearing jeans, no makeup, and the same gray sweater she had worn the night before. She looked as if she had aged 10 years in 2 days. When she saw me, she stopped. "Mom." I nodded once. Harper sat beside me, her face pale but determined. Melissa's eyes moved to her daughter, and shame passed over her so plainly I almost had to look away. Linda gestured to the chair across from us. "Sit down, Melissa." There was no softness in her voice, but there was no cruelty either. That was Linda's gift. She could make accountability feel like a door instead of a trap, but you still had to walk through it. Melissa sat. For the next 2 hours, my daughter talked. At first, her voice trembled. She corrected herself often. She cried when she mentioned Robert's letter, but she did not stop. She told Linda that Greg had been losing money for more than a year. His real estate commissions had slowed, and instead of cutting expenses, he began chasing what he called opportunities. A marketing partnership, a short-term property investment, a Florida condo he insisted would become a vacation rental and solve everything. She admitted she knew about the sale before I was sent to Carol's house. She admitted she called Carol and arranged the visit under false pretenses. That one hurt badly. Carol had not betrayed me. She had believed Melissa's story that I needed rest. But Melissa had used an old friend as part of the plan, wrapping deceit in the language of care. Linda asked, "Did Evelyn give consent to sell her belongings?" Melissa looked at me. "No." "Did she give consent for you or Greg to keep or manage the proceeds?" "No." "Did you tell buyers Evelyn had approved the sale?" Melissa closed her eyes. "Yes." Harper made a small sound beside me. Melissa's chin trembled, but she continued. "Greg told me people would ask questions if Mom wasn't there. He said we needed a simple answer. And did you know that answer was false?" Linda asked. "Yes, there it was. No excuse, no fog. No," Greg said. "Just yes." Linda wrote it down. Then came the power of attorney. Melissa insisted she had not signed my name. I believed her, not because I wanted to, but because her terror around that subject was different. She admitted she had filled in some personal information on the form after Greg said they might need it someday if I got confused. She admitted she had shown him old cards with my handwriting because he complained he could never read cursive signatures on records. When she realized what she had said, she covered her mouth. "Oh, God," she whispered. Linda's pen stopped. "Melissa, did Greg use those cards to imitate your mother's signature?" "I don't know." She began crying. "But after the bank refused it, he was furious. He said the branch manager was an old fool and that Dad had poisoned people against us." My stomach turned. Robert, even from his grave, had become an obstacle Greg resented. Linda asked about the money. Melissa gave account names, transfer amounts, the Florida property company, the cash in the home safe. She provided passwords to marketplace accounts and buyer messages.
She even gave Linda the name of the Cincinnati antique dealer who had sold my father's watch Onward Heritage Rail in time. Linda's expression sharpened at that. "That will help," she said. Melissa looked at me, then eyes swollen and bare. "Mom, I know this doesn't fix it." "No," I said, "it doesn't." She nodded as if she deserved the pain of hearing it. When the statement was finished, Linda printed it. Melissa read it carefully, then signed each page. Her hand shook when she wrote her name. I watched that signature and thought of the false one on the rejected power of attorney. One signature used to steal authority. Another maybe used to begin giving it back. Then Linda leaned forward. "Melissa, I need you to understand the seriousness of this. You may still face consequences. Cooperation helps, but it does not erase your involvement." "I know. Greg may try to blame you entirely." Melissa gave a hollow laugh. "He already said he would." "Then do not speak with him alone about this." Melissa looked down. "He's still my husband." Harper's voice broke. "Mom," Melissa looked at her daughter, and for the first time I saw the truth strike her fully. Not just what she had done to me, what she had allowed Harper to live beside. "I know," Melissa whispered. "I know." Linda closed the folder. "We will send immediate notice to the condo company and request preservation of all transaction records. We will also notify Greg's brokerage depending on what the documents confirm." Melissa's face went white. His brokerage, if he used his professional knowledge accounts contacts or misrepresentations in this matter, his license may be implicated. That was when the door to the conference room opened. Linda's assistant appeared startled. "I'm sorry," she said. "Mr. Wheeler is here. He says he has a right to be present." Melissa gripped the chair. Linda stood. "He does not." Greg's voice carried from the hallway before the assistant could close the door. "Melissa." Harper reached for my hand. Linda stepped into the doorway, blocking him from entering. "Mr. Wheeler, this is a private meeting." Greg appeared behind her, flushed and furious, his polished look cracking at the edges. He held his phone in one hand and a folder in the other. "My wife is in there," he snapped. "Your wife is an adult and may meet with counsel if she chooses. I'm her husband, and not her owner." The words sliced through the hallway. Greg's face darkened. He looked past Linda into the room. His eyes landed on Melissa. "What did you sign?" Melissa did not answer. "What did you sign?" he repeated louder. Linda's voice became icy. "Lower your voice in my office." Greg laughed. "You have no idea what you're doing. This family is falling apart because an old woman can't let go of junk." The room went silent. Something in Harper changed first. She stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor. "Don't call her that." Greg blinked, surprised. "Harper, sit down?" No. It was a small word, but it carried generations of women learning to say it. Greg's eyes narrowed. "You've been listening to them. I've been seeing you." For a second, I saw fear flicker through him. Not fear of Linda, not fear of me, fear of losing the daughter who had still believed some version of his story. He turned to Melissa. "We're leaving." Melissa sat frozen. "Now," he said. She looked at me, then at Harper, then at Linda, and then she said, "No." Greg stared. "What did you say?" Melissa's voice trembled, but she repeated it. "No." The words seemed to shock her. No. The words seemed to shock her as much as him. Greg stepped forward, but Linda did not move. "If you take another step," she said, "I will call security and then the police." He pointed at Melissa. "You think they're going to protect you? She'll turn on you too, as much as him."
Greg stepped forward, but Linda did not move. "If you take another step," she said, "I will call security and then the police." He pointed at Melissa. "You think they're going to protect you? She'll turn on you too." His finger shifted toward me. "She's already making you the villain." I stood. "No, Greg, you made her one. I am giving her the chance to become honest." His face twisted. "You're pathetic. All this over some dusty letters and a broken quilt. The old me might have cried." The new me looked him in the eye. "My husband's letters came back," I said. "My mother's quilt came back. And now your lies are coming back too." Linda's assistant had already called building security. 2 men appeared behind Greg. He looked from them to Linda, then to Melissa. "You'll regret this," he said. Melissa whispered, "I already do." That silenced him longer than anything else had. But Greg was not finished. He lifted the folder in his hand. "You want records here? Take them. See how far you get." He threw the folder onto the floor. Papers slid across the hallway. Then he walked out, escorted by security shoulders, stiff anger following him like smoke. Linda picked up the folder carefully with a tissue, as if she did not want to disturb fingerprints. Inside were copies of marketplace sales deposit slips and a printed email from Heritage Rail and Time. Linda read the email. Then she looked at me. "Evelyn," she said, "this includes the name of the private collector who bought your father's watch." My hand flew to my chest. "Who?" "A retired judge in Cincinnati, Daniel Whitcomb." For a moment, I thought of my father's watch, the one he had given me on my 18th birthday in Cincinnati. Daniel Whitcomb. For a moment, the whole room blurred. The watch was not lost in some anonymous collection. It had a name, a place, a chance. Harper squeezed my hand. Melissa began crying again, but quietly this time, not asking anyone to rescue her. Linda placed the email on the table. "We will contact Judge Whitcomb today." I looked at Robert's letter beside my purse, at Melissa's signed statement, at Harper standing beside me, and at the papers Greg had thrown in rage that now helped us. For the first time, I understood something about justice. Sometimes the guilty reveal themselves not through confession, but through arrogance. And Greg had just handed us the next door. Judge Daniel Whitcomb called Linda Marshall himself. I was sitting at my kitchen table when Linda put him on speaker the next afternoon. Harper was beside me, carefully labeling the returned photo albums with sticky notes. Melissa sat across from us, silent hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she had not touched. She had stayed at a small hotel the night before. Not with Greg. That alone felt like a crack in a wall that had stood too long. Linda's voice came through the phone first. "Evelyn, Judge Whitcomb is on the line. He understands you are present." Then a man spoke low and measured. "Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry we are meeting under these circumstances." "Thank you, Judge. Daniel, please. I retired 7 years ago. I only keep the title because people insist on using it." There was a quiet dignity in his voice. Not arrogance. Something older and steadier. Linda had sent him documentation that morning. Proof of ownership photos of my father, with the watch screenshots of Greg's listing, and the statement Melissa had signed. I had spent an hour searching through returned albums until I found the right photograph. My father standing beside a rail yard fence in 1968, one hand holding his lunch pail, the watch chain visible against his vest. When Linda scanned it, I had touched his face in the picture and whispered, "Help me bring it home, Daddy." Now, the man who had bought it cleared his throat. "I purchased the watch from Heritage Rail and Time last week," he said. The dealer represented it as coming from a voluntary estate sale. I closed my eyes at that phrase. Voluntary estate sale. A lie dressed in respectable clothing. "I understand," I said. "I collect railroad timepieces because my own grandfather worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad," he continued. "I know what these objects can mean to families. Had I known the circumstances, I would not have purchased it." My hand tightened around Robert's letter. "Do you still have it?" "Yes, ma'am." The breath I had been holding left me. "It has not been altered, cleaned, or resold. It is in my possession." Linda spoke. "Judge Whitcomb, as discussed, we are prepared to arrange reimbursement through the pending recovery process." He interrupted gently. "That will not be necessary." I opened my eyes. "I beg your pardon," Linda said. "I am returning the watch to Mrs. Carter. If reimbursement is appropriate, it can be sorted later with the dealer or the parties responsible. But I will not hold a daughter's misconduct over a widow's memory." Melissa lowered her head. The words struck her hard. I saw it. Widow's memory. Not junk, not old things, not hidden cash. Memory. I pressed my hand to my mouth. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'll bring it myself tomorrow," he said, "if that is acceptable." I could barely answer. After the call ended, the kitchen remained quiet. Harper wiped her eyes. Melissa stared into her untouched coffee. Finally, she said, "I don't know how to live with what I did." I looked at her. That sentence was different from all the others. It was not about consequences, not about Greg, not about fear. It was about conscience. You live with it by not running from it. That sentence was different from all the others. It was not about consequences, not about Greg, not about fear. It was about conscience. You live with it by not running from it, I said. She nodded, tears sliding down her face. "I let him call your memories junk." "Yes." "I let him sell Dad's letters." "Yes." "I let him say you wouldn't notice." "Yes." Each yes hurt both of us, but I had learned that truth does not become kinder when covered. It only becomes infected. Melissa pressed both hands over her face. "I'm sorry, Mom." I had heard those words before. This time, I waited. She lowered her hands. "I'm sorry I chose convenience over courage. I'm sorry I used your age as an excuse to take control. I'm sorry I lied to Harper. I'm sorry I made you feel like you were already gone while you were standing right in front of me." My throat tightened. That was the first apology that named the wound. Harper reached across the table and took her mother's hand. I did not. Not yet. And for once, Melissa did not demand that I did. Later that day, Linda arranged the next steps. The condo deposit would be frozen pending dispute. Greg's brokerage had been notified of possible misconduct involving misrepresentation, elder financial exploitation, and unauthorized sale of protected property. The cash in Greg and Melissa's home safe was to be turned over through Linda's office. Marketplace records were being preserved. Melissa agreed to cooperate fully. She also agreed to move her personal documents and essentials to the hotel until she could decide whether to return home safely. Linda gave her the number of a counselor experienced in coercive marriages and financial control. Accountability and safety are not enemies, Linda told her. You may need both. I wrote that sentence down later, because I needed both too. That evening, Harper stayed with me again. We made grilled cheese sandwiches because neither of us had energy for anything more. Melissa returned to the hotel with Linda's assistant following behind to make sure Greg did not confront her alone. Before leaving, Melissa paused on my porch. "Mom." "Yes." "May I come tomorrow when the watch comes back?" I studied her face. A week earlier, I would have said yes instantly because she was my daughter. A day earlier, I might have said no because the pain was still too raw. Now I understood boundaries had to be built with honest bricks, not anger. "You may come," I said, "but not to perform regret, only to witness." She swallowed. "I understand. I hope you do." The next morning, I woke before sunrise. My house looked different in the early light. The quilt was back on the rocking chair. Robert's letters were on the mantel. The brass lamp stood on the side table Mrs. Phelps had helped me replace temporarily. The rooms were still not full, but they no longer felt stripped to the bone. I made coffee. I placed my father's photograph on the kitchen table. I set out the $1 receipt for the quilt Robert's letter and the tiny winding key to the missing music box. Harper came downstairs wrapped in a throw blanket. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "No, me neither." At 10 o'clock, Melissa arrived. She looked nervous, but she came alone. She carried a small box. "I found this in the hall closet," she said. "Greg must have missed it." Inside were my pearl earrings and my grandmother's gold cross. My knees weakened. Melissa began crying. "I should have brought them sooner. I found them yesterday when I went back for clothes." I took the box. The cross lay tangled in its thin chain, plain, and worn from my grandmother's fingers, rubbing it during prayer. Robert's pearl earrings glowed softly against the cotton lining. "Thank you," I said. It was not forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. At 11:15, a dark sedan pulled into the driveway. Judge Daniel Whitcomb stepped out carrying a velvet case. He was in his late 70s, tall but slightly stooped with white hair and a navy coat. He removed his hat when he reached the porch. "Mrs. Carter." "Daniel." He smiled gently. "I believe this belongs to you." He opened the case. There it was, my father's watch. For a second, I could not touch it. The gold case shone softly, the old scratch near the hinge still visible, the chain coiled like a sleeping thing. Then I lifted it into my palm. The weight was exactly as I remembered. Not heavy to anyone else, perhaps, but to me it held my father's workdays, his silence, his rough hands, his final breath, and the sentence he gave me before leaving this world. "Your time belongs to you." I pressed the watch against my heart and cried. Harper cried too. Melissa stood near the doorway, weeping silently, not stepping forward, not asking to be comforted. That restraint told me she was learning. Judge Whitcomb looked toward the quilt, the letters, the scattered evidence of a family trying to mend what greed had torn. "My grandmother used to say," he said quietly, "families lose their souls when they start pricing what should have been protected." No one answered, because the truth of it filled the room. Before he left, he refused coffee, but accepted my thanks. He also handed Linda a written statement confirming the purchase and return of the watch. After his car disappeared down the street, I sat in the rocking chair with the quilt over my knees and the watch in my hand. Melissa knelt in front of me. Not dramatically, not like a scene, just a tired daughter kneeling before the mother she had wounded. "I can't ask you to forgive me now," she said. "No," I said softly. "You can't. I want to earn the chance someday. That will take time." "I know." I looked at her for a long while. Then I opened my palm and showed her the watch. "My father told me my time belonged to me. For years, I gave too much of it away because I thought love required it." Melissa bowed her head. "I am not doing that anymore. I know. If we are going to have a relationship, there will be boundaries. Legal ones, emotional ones, practical ones." She nodded. "You will repay what was taken." "Yes." "You will continue cooperating with Linda." "Yes." "You will not use Harper as a shield." Melissa looked at her daughter and broke down. "Never again." Harper came to stand beside her, crying too. "And you will get help," I said. "Real help. Not because Greg made you do everything, because you need to understand why you let him." Melissa covered her mouth and nodded. For the first time, I reached out and touched her shoulder. She sobbed harder at that small mercy than she had at any accusation. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a door left unlocked. That afternoon, the three of us placed my father's watch on the mantel beside Robert's letters. Harper set the brass winding key next to it. "The music box is still missing," she said. "Yes," I answered. "Do you think we'll find it?" "Maybe. And if we did not, I would grieve it." But I was beginning to understand that healing did not mean every lost thing returned. Healing meant I returned to myself. 3 weeks after my father's watch came home, the music box returned too. Not through Greg, not through Melissa, not through Linda's letters or legal pressure. It came back in a padded envelope from Sandra Klein, the woman who had bought the bundle of assorted decorative items in Springfield. Inside was the music box wrapped in tissue paper with a note written in blue ink. "Mrs. Carter, I am sorry it took me so long. I bought several items at the sale because I thought they were abandoned family pieces. When I learned the truth, I looked through everything again and found this. I hope it still plays." There was no return address, just the note. Harper was with me when I opened it. She had been coming by after school almost every afternoon sometimes to help organize recovered items, sometimes just to sit with me while I made tea. She still checked her phone too often, but she had started asking questions about old photographs. Real questions. Who was this? Where was that taken? What did Grandpa sound like when he laughed? That day when she saw the music box, she gasped. "Grandma," she whispered, "is that it?" I nodded. The box was smaller than she expected. Dark wood, rounded edges, tiny painted flowers on the lid, one corner chipped from when Melissa had dropped it at age 6. I had not seen it for years, not really. It had sat on a shelf, quiet and familiar. One of those objects you do not touch often because you believe it will always be there. I picked up the brass winding key from the mantel and held it toward Harper. "You do it." Her eyes widened. "Me? Yes." She took the key carefully, as if she had been handed something sacred. She fitted it into the back of the box and turned it once, twice, 3 times. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the first trembling notes of Edelweiss rose into the room. Thin, uneven, beautiful. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, Melissa was 3 years old again, spinning in socks on the living room rug. Arms outstretched. Robert clapping off beat outstretched. Robert clapping off beat me. Laughing so hard I nearly dropped the laundry basket. Memory did not return politely. It rushed in all at once. When I opened my eyes, Harper was crying. "So, that's the song, me laughing so hard, I nearly dropped the laundry basket." Memory did not return politely. It rushed in all at once. When I opened my eyes, Harper was crying. "So that's the song," she said. "Yes. It sounds sad. It can. But it's also tender." She nodded, listening until the final note faded. That evening, Melissa came by. She had been keeping her distance in the right way, not disappearing, not crowding me. She brought receipts to Linda. She helped recover items. She returned cash through proper channels. She began counseling. She filed for legal separation from Greg after he refused to accept responsibility and tried one final time to blame everything on her. Greg's brokerage suspended him pending investigation. The Florida condo deposit was frozen. Linda told me the legal process would take time, and I believed her. Justice in real life does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives as paperwork signatures, uncomfortable meetings, and one truthful statement after another. But something had already shifted. Greg no longer entered my house. Greg no longer spoke for my daughter. Greg no longer decided what my memories were worth. When Melissa saw the music box on the table, she stopped in the doorway. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh," she whispered.
Harper stood beside me, protective now, in a way that made my heart ache. Melissa stepped forward slowly. It came back. Yes. She looked at the tiny painted flowers, the chipped corner, the brass key. I remember dancing to that. I know. Her eyes filled, but she did not make the moment about her tears. She had learned slowly that remorse was not the same as repair. May I hear it? She asked. I looked at Harper. Harper looked at me. Then I wound the key myself. The music played again. Melissa covered her face and wept silently. Harper did not rush to comfort her. I did not either. But when the song ended, Melissa whispered, I sold a piece of my own childhood and called it nothing. I answered softly, Yes, you did. She nodded through tears. I'm sorry, Mom. I know. And for the first time, I meant both words. After she left, I went to Robert's old writing desk. The hidden panel had been repaired, but I kept it loose enough to open. Inside, I had placed his first forgotten letter, the one that had started everything. I took it out to read again, but as I lifted the envelope, a smaller folded slip fell from inside. I frowned. Somehow, in all the chaos, I had missed it. The paper was yellowed, and Robert's handwriting was faint. Evie. If you found the first letter, you probably found more pain than I ever wanted for you. I am sorry for that. But I hope you also found your own voice again. Remember this, the things we keep are not meant to trap us in the past. They are meant to remind us who we are when others try to rename us. You are not a burden. You are not clutter. You are not a woman waiting to be managed. You are my Evie. You are strong, stubborn, soft-hearted, and still alive. Live like it. I sat down because my knees could not hold me. Still alive. Those two words moved through me like breath returning after a long winter. I had spent so much time guarding what remained that I had almost forgotten I was allowed to keep living beyond the damage. Robert had not protected the house, so I could become a museum keeper of grief. He had protected it so I could remain free inside my own life. The next morning, I did something unexpected. I rearranged the living room. Harper helped. Melissa came later and asked before touching anything. We moved the rocking chair closer to the window. We placed my mother's quilt across it, not as evidence now, but as warmth. We set Robert's letters in a wooden chest where they belonged. My father's watch went inside a small glass case on the mantel beside his photograph. The music box sat on the side table where anyone who understood its value could ask to hear it. Then I removed some things myself. Old magazines I no longer needed. Broken frames, duplicate kitchen items. A box of clothes I had kept for no reason except fear of letting go. Melissa watched me carry the donation bag to the porch. Are you sure? She asked. I smiled faintly. Yes. The difference is, I choose this. Her eyes lowered. I understand. And I think she did. Months passed. Some items never returned. The silver tray was gone. 2 teacups remained missing. Robert's fishing hat never came back. A few photographs were lost somewhere in the hands of strangers. I grieved them, but I did not disappear with them. Melissa continued therapy. Harper and I started a Sunday tradition tea, 1 photo album and 1 story. Sometimes Melissa joined us. Sometimes she was not ready. Sometimes I was not ready. Healing, I learned, was not a straight road. It was a porch light left on, not a door flung open. One Sunday afternoon, Harper wound the music box and asked me, Grandma, do you forgive Mom?
I watched Melissa through the kitchen window as she carried mugs to the table, moving carefully in my house, now with respect. I am learning how I said. Harper nodded. Do you think Grandpa would be proud? I looked at Robert's photograph on the mantel. Yes, I whispered, but not because everything came back. Then why? Because I did. The music played softly between us, and for the first time in a long time, my house did not feel like a place where things had been stolen. It felt like a place where truth had survived. If this story moved you, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had something precious dismissed by people who didn't understand its meaning? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories about family truth healing and second chances speak to your heart, please like and subscribe so we can keep walking through these journeys together. Sometimes the deepest wounds do not come from strangers. They come from the people who know exactly where our softest memories live. Evelyn's story reminds us that keepsakes are not just old things. A watch can hold a father's final lesson. A quilt can hold a mother's hands. A box of letters can hold a marriage that survived distance, fear, and time. But this story is also about boundaries. Love does not require silence. Forgiveness does not mean handing someone the same knife twice. Family should never use age, grief, loneliness, or trust as permission to take control of someone's life. Respect is not optional just because someone is older. Their memories, choices, home, and dignity still belong to them. The forgotten letter changed everything, not because paper has power, but because truth does. Robert's letter reminded Evelyn that she was not helpless, not invisible, and not already gone. And when she finally stood up, she did more than recover objects. She recovered herself. If you have ever been made to feel like your memories do not matter, I hope this story reminds you that they do. Your life is not clutter. Your past is not a burden. And your voice is still yours. Please comment your thoughts below. Have you ever had to protect your dignity from your own family? Share where you're watching, from what time it is there, and subscribe for more emotional stories about truth, justice, and healing.